Chapter 121. Genius 1 second. Remember love divided by go divided by little? Sagnet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Since he was the one who wanted to listen to it, Luocio decided to listen to it even if it was changed by the devil. Love go little say, W. In the past, the evil Taoist Zhang Jiao created the Taiping sect and revolted. Soon, he was defeated by the Han dynasty. Zhang Jiao was defeated and escaped successfully by the golden cicada shedding shell trick. He hid in the Wei family of Hedong. Wei Zhongdao's father was a disciple of the evil Taoist Zhang Jiao. However, his talent was not high and his cultivation was fruitless. Later, he entered the secular world and became a rich man. Wei Zhongdao's father took him in for the sake of their past relationship. Not long after, Wei Zhongdao married Kai Wenji. Later, he was seriously ill and couldn't be cured even if he spent all his wealth. When he was about to die, Zhang Jiao sealed his life and soul with the evil art. It was said that the soul of a dead person was still there, so there might be a way to revive him. Wei Zhongdao's father was overjoyed and begged his former senior brother to cast the spell. Jiao needs to travel far and find the place to cast the spell. In this way, the Wei family started to prepare everything. The news that Wei Zhongdao was seriously ill and couldn't be cured had spread. The Wei family didn't want to expose everything, so they hid it and held a funeral. At the same time, they didn't want others to find the traces of evil art on Wei Zhongdao's body and expose Zhang Jiao. Not long after, everything was well prepared. Coinciding with the chaotic times, they used the excuse that Wenji was kidnapped by the Han cavalry and secretly brought the zombie-like Wei Zhongdao out. They entered the land of the Han tribe. How do you know that it's just a trick of the evil Taoist? Luocio and Professor Qin Fang both heard the hatred in this ancient woman's mouth. The evil Taoist had planned everything. He seized the body of the Han tribe's sage king with the help of evil art and took control of the Han cavalry. He planned to make a comeback. Luocio frowned and said, "Since the demon lied to you, why did you say that your husband was still alive at that time?" Wenji sighed and said, "In the beginning, it was the evil Taoist who cast a spell to make my husband look like a living dead. He could walk without eating or drinking, and he could even talk. However, my husband's body was decaying day by day. He could only hide in a place of extreme negative energy to delay the decay. Later on, the evil Taoist found a divine stone from beyond the heavens on the grassland. It was actually able to bring spring back to a withered tree. The evil Taoist ordered people to build this underground palace and lay down a strange formation. Using the divine stone as an eye, he buried my husband inside. It will ensure that his body will not rot." Hearing this, Professor Qin Fang raised his head abruptly, asking excitedly, "That god stone really brought your husband back to life?" Wenji shook her head. "At first, I also held this hope. Who knew that everything was just an illusion? Once he left the formation, my husband's body would continue to decay. In order to maintain the negative energy of this tomb palace, I could only come in twice a year." Luocio sighed. "Is this the reason why you don't want to return to the Han dynasty?" Wenji wept in a low voice. "Since I've already married my husband, I'll accompany him for a long time. If I return to the Han dynasty, how can we meet again in this life? Even if I can only see him twice a year, I don't want my husband to be alone in this cold and desolate tomb palace. My husband once persuaded me to go back, but I didn't want to. I knelt in front of the tomb for 3 days and 3 nights. My husband's heart finally softened. I've been sick and weak since I was young. But this place beyond the Great Wall is too harsh. When I was dying, I begged the evil Taoist to bury me in this tomb palace, so that I could accompany my husband for a long time." At this moment, Wenji's face was full of resentment, but I didn't expect that the evil Taoist knew that the god's stone had no effect on my husband. He buried my husband just to let my husband's soul nourish that strange god's stone. The evil Taoist buried me in another place in the formation. My soul was in the stone coffin. I wanted to rush out several times, but I couldn't do anything about the light wolf walking in the formation, so I could only be trapped in the stone coffin. Love go little say, W. Chu Luochio couldn't help asking, what did he nourish the god stone for? When Ji said, later I learned that although the evil Taoist knew that the god stone had no effect on my husband, he only thought that he couldn't understand the mystery of the god stone. The evil Taoist found that the god stone could absorb people's souls. The more souls it absorbed, the stronger its power would be. He was injured in his early years and couldn't recover. After becoming left virtuous prince, he was injured again and didn't have long to live. The evil Taoist didn't want to die, so he buried himself here when he was about to die. You two think there are only 2 floors in the underground palace, but actually there's a 3rd floor below the 2nd floor, where the evil Taoist's tomb is. Countless lives had been lost in the process. The evil Taoist covered the coffin, just waiting for the god stone to absorb enough souls, so that he could break out of the coffin and be reborn one day. The story of the poor woman who was brought out of the coffin had finished. Professor Qin Fong was silent, thinking about something. This poor woman attached herself to Zhang Qingrui and said these. Perhaps she was vaguely blaming Professor Qin Fong and the others for digging into the underground palace for their own selfish desires. Yu Yi jumped down from the entrance silently, landing steadily on the ground. She said softly, Master, the miscellaneous things outside have been cleaned up. Boss Luo, who naturally believed in Yu Ye's ability, nodded. He didn't intend to think about those treasure-robbing groups who lost their lives. As for listening to this story, he intended to wait for Yu Ye's return. Take that set of coffin with you. Luoqiu said directly, Professor, it's time to find the coffin of your former brothers. Do you have any clue? Professor Qin shook his head, sighing. That year we couldn't even touch the 1st floor. After this place collapsed due to the explosives, it's even more difficult. Be careful. Professor Qin Fong's expression changed dramatically. Following his line of sight, they saw a place that was emitting a faint light suddenly appear in front of them. It stood on all 4s on the ground. It was the light wolf that had been mentioned before. Professor Qin Fong, who had seen the horror of this kind of light wolf, took out his pistol subconsciously. However, at this moment, the light wolf suddenly howled, the sound resounding in the underground palace. One after another, light wolves gushed out from all directions. They emerged from the walls and from the ground, baring their fangs. In just a short moment, dozens of light wolves had already gathered. Professor Qin Fong's expression suddenly became ferocious. The appearance of these light wolves brought him back to that night 20 years ago. Ah! Along with Professor Qin's extremely agitated mood, the bullet was shot out from the pistol. Bang! 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 The bullet easily penetrated the light wolf's body, but the bullet marks disappeared in a blink of an eye, just like shooting into the water. At this moment, the light wolf that was attacked abruptly kicked off with its hind legs and pounced towards the group. No! No! Don't come here! Professor Qin Fong revealed an unexpected panic. Seeing the light wolf pouncing on them, the professor curled up on the ground, holding his head and trembling all over. Luoqiu frowned. It seemed that the memory of that year hurt the professor more than usual. However, facing the pouncing light wolf, Luoqiu didn't move a bit, letting the light wolf pounce on him. That light wolf opened its mouth and bit on Luoqiu's shoulder. Unexpectedly, Boss Luo just waved his hand, as if patting the dust on his shoulder. Then, the light wolf completely scattered like a torn shadow. There was no trace of blood. There was nothing. It simply turned into fragments of light and disappeared. The disappearance of this light wolf seemed to have enraged all the light wolves. Dozens of light wolves pounced on them at the same time. Just some unreal things disappear. At this moment, Yu Yi walked to the front of Luoqiu, waving her hand and shooting out a ball of black flame. Under the black tongue of flames, all the light wolves were annihilated just like the first one. That's right. Since the appearance of these light wolves, Luochu felt that these things weren't real at all. The reason why they could exist was probably something like an illusion. This kind of illusion didn't work on him, and it didn't work on Yu Yi either. Snyder said that those who went down were killed by random gunfire, probably because they were scared. As for the camera of the drone, it naturally couldn't capture these unreal and uninteresting things. However, the professor was no longer squatting in his original place. Yu Yi pointed at Luochu's side, probably taking advantage of the chaos just now to escape alone. Luochu thought for a while, waving his hand to let the box containing Wenji's bones fly to his back. He wanted to continue moving forward like this. However, thinking about it, he felt like carrying the box on his back. When he was young, he felt that the man carrying the box on his back was very handsome, and that the golden holy garment that saved the world must be hidden inside. But now, he obviously didn't think so. I think it's not difficult for me to get used to it. Luochu turned his head and looked at Zhang Qingrui at this moment. At this moment, the box broke open automatically, and those bones rolled out and scattered on the ground. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 122. Genius 1 second. Remember love/go/little? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. No. Don't come here. Don't come here. In extreme panic, Professor Qin Fong quickly shot all the bullets in his hand. However, more and more light wolves besieged him. He leaned against a wall with extreme fear, involuntarily recalling the night 20 years ago. They had been hiding from place to place, but finally, they were chased by these light wolves and had to use explosive. Leaning against the wall, Professor Qin Fong felt the coldness from the underground. He felt that his hands were wet. Cold sweat had already soaked his clothes. All of a sudden, a light wolf pounced on him with a ferocious look. No! The professor closed his eyes tightly, just like that night. However, after a while, he opened his eyes again in astonishment, only to find that the light wolves had disappeared. Only Luo Qiu and a few others were walking towards him with flashlights in their hands. These were the things that Miss Maid found from those people on the pit before she came down. Luoqiu didn't consider these things at first, but after Yu Yi took out the flashlight, he sighed again that he was taken care of in every possible way. Those light wolves. Professor Qin Fong was still nervous and panicked. Professor, it's all right. Those are just illusions, but it seems that ordinary people like us have no way to deal with them. At this time, a person walked out from behind Luoqiu, supporting the professor up. This person was obviously Miss Zhang. Professor Qin Fong gave a start, seeing that behind Luoqiu and his companion, there was a set of white bones standing upright weirdly. This, Zhang Qingrui could only smile bitterly, whispering, "Using the words of another student of yours, I've only heard such words. I'll get used to it." Of course, I was startled at first when I saw a set of white bones walking. After Wenji left Zhang Qingrui's body and returned to her skeleton, those scattered bones began to assemble automatically. Although it was a little scary for Miss Zhang, it was obviously better than the ancient woman's soul that had been attached to her body all the time. This time was different from the past. Being in this underground palace and under the control of Wenji's soul, Zhang Qingrui's consciousness didn't seem to fall asleep. She also listened to this poor woman's story carefully. Luoqiu didn't explicitly say that he would send Wenji to her husband's tomb. She didn't dare to beg, so she could only follow them all the way. The light wolves in this underground tomb would not only attack those who trespassed, but they would also attack her. As illusions, the light wolves didn't have real attacks. Once the attack was launched, it would only affect one's mind. If one's mind was strong enough, they might be able to resist these light wolves to a certain extent. Being trapped in the stone coffin for thousands of years, Wenji still couldn't approach her husband's tomb, mainly because of the existence of these light wolves. Though Luoqiu didn't explicitly say that he would help her to find her husband's tomb, he didn't seem to want her to leave either. Therefore, she followed him silently. Zhang Qingrui didn't know what the so-called deal between Luoqiu and the professor was, but now she was sure that facing those horrible light wolves, if there wasn't someone who could break them easily between Luoqiu and Yu Yi, the professor would have a hard time walking in this place. Along the way, many light wolves had been annihilated. But in this complicated underground palace, it was simply impossible to find the professor's companions. Along the way, Professor Qin Fang kept silent. His expression became more and more depressed, as if he had aged 10 years in a flash. It was hard for Ms. Zhang to imagine why the professor had aged so much in such a short time. He was no longer as elegant as when he was teaching. His hair was disheveled and his eyes lost their brilliance. After walking in this underground palace for a long time, Luoqiu, who had been looking around calmly, suddenly stopped. "Let's have a rest." Seeing Luoqiu stop abruptly, Professor Qin Fang thought he had discovered something. However, he was disappointed after hearing Luoqiu's words. He didn't say anything, sitting down against the wall. If Wenji left Luoqiu and Yu Yi, it would be difficult for her to walk. Therefore, she could only sit aside silently. Seeing the posture of this Miss Bones, Miss Zhang still didn't dare to look at her. She sat by the side and massaged her sore calves. Zhang Qingrui didn't know what would happen next. Wenji, who was attached to her body at the beginning, had already returned to this tomb palace. Therefore, Zhang Qingrui felt that she had nothing else to do but to let her leave alone. Not to mention whether she could leave this prairie, it was a problem for her to climb out or face those light wolves. Zhang Qingrui sighed. Suddenly, she thought of the big pancake she had hidden at the beginning. Feeling hungry, she took it out from her clothes. She thought for a while and split the biscuit into 4 pieces. Miss White Bones probably doesn't need these. Professor, eat something first. If you're too hungry, you can continue walking. She walked to Professor Qin Fang, handing him a pancake. Then, she walked to Luoqiu and Yu Yi. Miss Servant Girl just smiled. "I don't need it." The servant girl really didn't need to eat. But Ms. Zhang still felt uncomfortable. She thought that the servant girl was disgusted because she took the food out of her clothes, so she felt a little embarrassed. "I heard it's a local delicacy if eaten with milk tea." But Luoqiu took a pancake, putting it into his mouth and taking a bite. Zhang Qingrui gave a start. She felt that Luoqiu was the kind of guy who always made people embarrassed, but sometimes he was the destroyer of embarrassment. "You're probably the only one who can think of this question in this place." Zhang Qingrui chuckled, suddenly feeling relaxed. Luoqiu didn't say anything, only taking another bite. But at this moment, Professor Qin Fang's extremely agitated voice was heard. "What did you put in it?" Professor Qin Fang threw the pancake on the ground, clutching his throat painfully, vomiting continuously. I just put some mutton inside, nothing else." Zhang Qingrui gave a start. "Professor, are you suffering again? I heard that people with brain cancer will vomit frequently." You! At this moment, Professor Qin Fang seemed to have gone mad. He rushed to Qingrui Zhang and reached out his hand to strangle her neck. His eyes and expression were extremely ferocious. Let me! Professor. Zhang Qingrui grasped the professor's hands painfully, but couldn't free him. Luoqiu suddenly asked, "Professor, is this your determination?" Professor Qin Fang, who was on the verge of losing control, suddenly stiffened his body. His expression changed from ferocious to frightened, as if he got an electric shock. He let go of Zhang Qingrui's neck at once, stepping back several steps. Zhang Qingrui coughed several times, holding the wall with difficulty, but dared not to approach him. At this moment, Professor Qin Fang's legs went soft, kneeling down on the ground as if he had lost his soul. What happened to the professor?" Zhang Qingrui looked at Luoqiu blankly. But the one who answered her was Wenji sitting beside her. This Mr. Qin and his companions broke into the underground palace, being chased away by the light wolf. They tried to escape but got separated at last. Mr. Qin and his companions were trapped in the stone room and ran out of food. Finally, he survived by eating his companions' flesh and blood. The explosion of the tomb palace was also what happened when he met his companions after surviving. Eat, people. Looking at Professor Qin Fang lowering his head, Zhang Qingrui felt that he had become a soulless shell. He had only eaten a small piece of mutton, yet he had such a reaction. She recalled that she asked the professor why he was so persistent to come back to this tomb palace. He said he needed to get something back. Zhang Qingrui suddenly understood. What he wanted to get back was his humanity that he had lost. Yin. Chapter 123. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by little? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. The professor survived in the end. At that time, the group of brothers was ambitious, intending to dig out the treasures from the tomb palace. Who would have thought that he was the only one who survived? Yes, he survived in the end, but he was like a walking corpse. In the past 20 years, he couldn't have a good night's sleep. The life that survived by relying on the flesh and blood of his companions and good brothers was shackled heavily from the beginning. He couldn't eat any piece of meat these years. He once forced himself to bite, but as long as it entered his mouth, his body's instinct was stronger than his will. As long as the taste of meat melted in his mouth, he couldn't help but recall that night 20 years ago. Gao Rui was already by his side. He cut open his flesh because he was too hungry. When one was in despair, one could only be driven by instinct. I will never forget. Professor Qin Fang, who was in a daze, seemed to have aged 10 years again. He looked at his trembling hands. I used them to scoop up Gao Rui's blood and started to drink. I was too hungry, I couldn't help it, I kept telling myself. I looked into Gao Rui's eyes, I knew he didn't die. He looked at me just like that. He couldn't speak, but I knew he must be asking me, scolding me, cursing me, hating me. But I still continued to drink, to bite. I gave up everything I had, I became a beast that even I despised. I'm just a beast that had lost its humanity, a beast that even ate his own brother's flesh and blood. Professor Qin Fang started to cough blood in agitation. Under the abnormal fluctuation of emotions, Professor Qin Fang let out a wail of self-reproach, falling to the ground. Listening to the professor reveal the secret that had been buried in his heart for 20 years in a hoarse voice, the few people in the audience had different feelings. Zhang Qingrui didn't know what Luoqi was thinking, and she didn't know what Yu Yi was thinking. This girl now had a natural expression, showing no reaction to the professor's confession. He's also a pitiful person. In the silence, he heard Kai Wenji's soft sigh. At this time, Yu Yi walked to the professor's side to check. She raised her head and said, "He should be too excited, so he fainted. Do you want to wake him up?" Luoqi shook his head. "No need. Let him wake up naturally. He has been hiding these words for 20 years. Now that he has said them, he has naturally exhausted all of them. What Mr. Qin needs is not our tolerance," Kai Wenji said faintly from the side. Luoqi frowned and said, "What I'm more curious about is, how do you know about Professor's past? Didn't you say you were trapped in a stone coffin?" Kai Wenji said, "Although I can't leave the stone coffin, the burial chamber is part of the formation of the underground palace. With the help of the formation veins that absorb vital qi from all directions, I can sense a small portion of the nearby area." "Is that so?" Luoqi nodded. He stood up and said, "From here, you should remember how to return to your tomb, right? After I find it, I will send you to your husband's tomb." Kai Wenji might have been waiting for this opportunity. At this time, she bowed deeply and said, "Thank you for your kindness, young master." Not long after, under the guidance of Kai Wenji, Luoqi easily touched her former tomb. As the professor said before, because of the explosion 20 years ago, this tomb was implicated and was pressed down by the upper layer of the underground palace. But no matter how it collapsed, the position of the vertical falling thing probably wouldn't change much. Luochu asked at this time, in which direction? Kai Wenji stretched out her hand and pointed with her finger bone. In this direction, it was above the 4 tomb chambers. Luochu nodded. He walked to the front of the wall, reached out and touched it, and activated his ability similar to Mind's Eye. His sight was jumping around the thick soil filled each tomb chamber. Suddenly Luochu frowned. He withdrew his hand and turned back. I'm afraid it's not this layer that fell, but the 3rd layer below. The 2nd layer was also destroyed by the collapse. Then we can't find Gao Rui's body? Zhang Qingrui couldn't help but feel disappointed. Not necessarily, Yu Yi said lightly. She walked to the center of the tomb chamber and slowly squatted down. She stretched out her hand and pressed on the stone slab. Master, please pay attention. After saying that, Yu Ye's arm exerted a little force and directly pressed on the floor. It seemed that nothing had happened and it was just a gentle press. But in the blink of an eye, a slight cracking sound was heard. At this moment, with the servant girl as the center point, the entire stone chamber's floor cracked at a terrifying speed. Before Zhang Qingrui could react, she felt as if her body had suddenly lost gravity, and fell down along with the cracked rock. But at this time she felt something dragging her body. Rumble! The stone chamber started to fall. Not long after, everyone fell into a cyan world. There was no complicated maze like in the 1st or 2nd layer. There were only a large number of pillars supporting the entire 3rd layer. Here, they could see corpses all over the ground. They fell on the ground in various postures. White bones were piled up like a sea of bones. Countless white bones, some of which were already broken. There was a cyan light source in the depth of those pillars. It was this inverted light source that illuminated the entire 3rd layer of the underground palace. Luochu looked up and estimated the position. He then started to search. This place was unusually gloomy and cold, like a ghost town. Zhang Qingrui's body started to tremble. She didn't dare to move her feet. At this time, Professor Qin Fong coughed several times and slowly woke up, perhaps because of the loud noise caused by the falling stone. Qin Fong looked around blankly, but his eyes suddenly froze. He coughed several times, and his weak body started to crawl on the ground. He swept away those white bones in front of him, and crawled out a clean path. Finally, he stopped crawling and stopped in front of a corpse. It was unknown whether it was because of the extreme cold here. The corpse that was supposed to be dead became stiff instead, and didn't decay much. That corpse should have hit a pillar when it fell from above. Now, it was in a sitting posture, with its head lowered. However, Luochu and others who followed him could clearly see the bones of the corpse's arms, neck, and even the places where the clothes were torn. Those were the traces of being bitten. Qin Fong didn't speak. His hands were trembling, as if he had exhausted all his strength. He slowly and timidly straightened the corpse. Gao Rui, old Qin, I finally found you. I came to see you. Qin Fong's trembling hands touched his former brother's face, holding it up slowly. He said in a daze, I know you're also waiting for me. For the past 20 years, I always knew that I could hear it every night. That ****ate your flesh and drank your blood. You didn't say anything, but I could hear that you must have cursed me bitterly in your heart time and time again. I knew it all. Qin Fong started to tidy up Gao Rui's clothes, his voice already hoarse. That day I heard voices and found that Nyozi and the others didn't die. They were just nearby. I didn't dare to bring you out. I wiped off the blood on my lips. I rolled on the ground, letting the soil cover the traces on my body. At that time, fear and self-reproach had already erased my conscience. I didn't know how to face Nyozi and the others, let alone how to face your wife. Qin Fong suddenly gave a sad smile. When I left, I didn't dare to look at you. When I look at you, it's like looking at myself, looking at the version of myself that I threw myself onto you. He heaved a long sigh, These years, I've been asking myself, why did we dig the ground and dig the grave? We comforted ourselves with various excuses, but in fact, we were just deceiving ourselves. In fact, we only did it for money. Why did we want money? Of course, it was for living. We coveted everything, and that's how we ended up now. I'm the only one who survived. But I asked myself, am I still alive? Professor Qin Fang started to tidy up Gao Rui's messy hair. Don't worry, I've raised your child Qiu. She's fine, don't worry. Before the new year, I've written my will. When I die, I'll give everything to her. I've also buried your wife in the garden behind your house in your hometown. I've set up a crown grave for you beside her. I thought that one day I'll bring you out and bury you beside your wife. Qin Fang suddenly became silent. After a while, he said, but now I know that I don't dare to bring you back. How can I bring you back like this? What face do I have to bring your broken body back? All of a sudden, Qin Fang pulled out a bright dagger from his boot, saying softly, so, at least I have to make up for the missing part of your body before I can take it back. Gao Rui, I'll give you back what I ate, okay? He used the dagger in his hand to cut off his other arm, cutting his flesh to the bone, and then pulled it forcefully. Qin Fang screamed miserably, pulling out a piece of bright red flesh from his arm. This is the first bite. But he didn't stop. Instead, he raised the dagger in his hand, cutting off his arm again. One cut and another cut. The third cut. Seeing Professor Qin Fang's self-mutilation, Zhang Qingrui wanted to step forward, but her arm was pulled by Luoqiu immediately. This is too cruel. Professor, you don't have to. Luoqiu shook his head, saying, he's starting to find what he lost. Do you want to stop him? Zhang Qingrui lowered her head, turning around. She couldn't bear to see this. Hearing Professor Qin Fang's continuous screams, her scalp was numb. She couldn't bear it anymore. Can't we do something? Luoqiu blinked his eyes. He suddenly felt something was hidden in Gao Rui's body. Like a flame, it suddenly jumped up. The soul in the body hadn't completely dispersed. Was it just sleeping? Maybe it was caused by the special environment of the third floor of the underground palace. Luoqiu looked at Professor Qin Fang subconsciously. When he cut the 10th cut, his arm had already been separated from the bone and flesh, becoming extremely horrible. Finally, after the 11th cut, Qin Fang intended to cut his thigh. Luoqiu moved. He walked quickly to Qin Fang, reaching out to grab his arm that was holding the dagger. Don't stop me! Professor, you're ashamed of the first cut, so are the second one. All the time. Luoqiu's expression didn't change. After cutting off this arm, do you feel it's not enough? Or do you think you can get the pleasure of redemption by continuing to hurt yourself? I thought you'd stop by yourself. What did you say? Luoqiu sighed. Professor, do you know you're laughing? Qin Fang's body stiffened. His fingers that were holding the dagger loosened in a flash. The dagger fell to the ground with a clang. I'm just. Luoqiu looked at Professor Qin Fang's left arm that was separated from the bone and flesh. He silently tore his own clothes into strips of cloth, wrapping Professor Qin Fang's arm and shoulder tightly. I'm actually not in a position to stop you. But I'm curious. Professor, you said that your brother just watched silently that year, right? Qin Fang gave a start. Luoqiu stood up, suddenly pointing at the forehead of Gao Rui's corpse. He's still here. Maybe he can tell you the answer. In front of him, the cold and withered corpse started to gush out some white fog. That white fog slowly rotated, like a white paint spreading in the water, and then gradually formed a man's face that was almost the same as that of the corpse. Gao Rui. Liberated from the corpse, it was the person who should have died 20 years ago. Gao Rui. It's really you. Qin Fang opened his eyes wide, looking at the soul in front of him with excitement. You're still here. Gao Rui's soul just shook his head slightly, using the tone that only existed in Qin Fang's memory. Old Qin, do you know you're so old now I can't chew your flesh? Qin Fang knelt on the ground again. his shoulders twitching, his expression sorrowful, tears running down his cheeks, his voice hoarse. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Chuyu, my child, you're pretty now, aren't you? Thank you for taking care of me these years. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I've also made you worry about my wife and deal with her funeral. As her husband, I can't do anything about it. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Old Chin, you just said, in the past 20 years you've been asking, why did we do those immoral things? I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Actually, I'm also thinking, but I can't think of an answer. Maybe it's just like what you said, it's just for money, for greed. However, have you forgotten that no matter how greedy we are, every time we succeed in conquering an ancient tomb, the excitement, the joy, the unparalleled satisfaction, and the joy of sharing with our brothers? I'm sorry. I couldn't walk at that time, my legs were already broken. Didn't you carry me to the end? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I can't walk, I really can't walk. But what about my wife, my child? I have to go out alive, but I can't. I know you're hungry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Do you know why I didn't say a word when I watched you eat me? I'm sorry. Because, if you can go out alive, I know you won't mistreat my wife and my child. Old Chin, these years, you've suffered a lot. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Gao Rui's soul stretched out his hand, gently putting it on Qin Fang's back. Hey, buddy, I said you're crying like a woman, an old and ugly woman. Qin Fang buried his head deep on Gao Rui's shoulder, and kept saying sorry, saying that he couldn't say those years when his mouth was full of blood and flesh, and he was sorry in his heart. What the professor lacked was not the cut of flesh and blood, but the words of apologies. Chapter 124. Genius 1 second. Remember love divided by little? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Professor, is he? Professor Qin Fang didn't speak anymore. He just leaned on Gao Rui's shoulder and stopped moving. Love go little say. Chuluochio didn't answer Zhang Qingrui's question. He walked to the professor's side again. He couldn't tell whether Professor Qin Fang was guilty or not in the past 20 years. Humans had no way to define whether something was guilty or not. He reached out his hand and gently wiped the professor's eyes. The pair of old eyes finally closed. Looking at her tutor, Zhang Qingrui felt sad for this old man, even though they had only spent time together in the classroom every now and then. She looked at Luochio, asking softly with a trace of uncertainty, "Did the professor get back what he lost?" Luochio's eyes turned soft. He grabbed Professor Qin Fang's remaining hand, putting it on Gao Rui's palm and putting it on top of each other. Thinking of those decades ago when they raided tombs together, went through fire and water together, and went through so many hardships together, would they also be like this, cheering hand on hand? How could he lose that kind of thing? Luochio raised his head, looking at his classmate. Since he lost it, he didn't need to come back. I think he just got lost. Zhang Qingrui finally shed a tear. Love go little say. Ordinary people would die after cutting their wrists due to excessive blood loss, not to mention the professor's arm, which was cut off by himself. When the professor stopped moving and didn't say sorry, she already knew it in her heart. From the beginning to the end, it was the professor who couldn't forgive himself. The mistake was like a demon in his heart, unable to extricate himself. The professor's life was coming to an end. But now, it was enough for him to get rid of the demon in his heart before he died. She also walked to the front of Professor Qin Fang, reaching out her palm and covering it with hers. Professor, don't get lost in your next life. She looked at the peaceful smile on the professor's face and smiled through her tears. She felt that the trip to the grassland, although dangerous, had strengthened her heart. Although Boss Luo had a mild temperament, he believed that he was a person who valued his promises. It didn't matter if it was the business of the club or something else. Gao Rui's awakened soul had yet to disperse, perhaps because of the uniqueness of this underground palace. Luochio looked at Gao Rui, and after a moment of silence, he said, "The professor and I have an agreement. It includes the content of bringing your body out. How do you wish to return home?" To Gao Rui, going home seemed like an incomparable luxury. The gradually fading soul looked at Qin Fang, who was no longer breathing, and felt that he was sleeping peacefully. "If possible, bury me in my hometown. Old Qin should be buried next to me." Gao Rui looked at him like an older brother and said softly, "This guy didn't have any family in the past. I brought him into the trade, so my home is his home." "Okay." Luoqiu nodded. It didn't matter if it was the business of the club, he just took it as a man's promise. Gao Rui said gratefully, "Thank you," however, before he could finish his sentence, the remnant soul in his body seemed to be pulled by something and began to twist and stretch. Not only him, but also Professor Qin Fang's body started to emit some white mist. Their souls seemed to be attracted by something, and they were all moving in the same direction. Luoqiu frowned, reaching out his hand. Professor Qin Fang's soul gathered in his palm, turning into a ball of white light with an imperceptible pink color. As for Gao Rui's soul, it didn't come back. The professor's soul was written in the contract as the transaction fee, and was protected by the club's treaty. Of course, no one could snatch it from the contract. At this moment, Kai Wenji's walking skeleton scattered all of a sudden. Leaving the skeleton, this ancient lady also appeared in the form of a soul. Compared to Gao Rui's soul, her soul was obviously resisting the attraction from the depths of the 3-story underground palace. "Is it the power of the immortal stone you mentioned, or the effect of the formation hidden in the underground palace?" Luoqiu took back the professor's soul, looking at her and asking, "I don't know. It's the first time for me to enter this place." Kai Wenji shook her head. "I know about the 3-story underground palace, but every time I want to approach it, I feel like I'm in a tornado, so I don't dare to approach it." "Luoqiu, I feel dizzy." Ms. Zhang held her forehead, her body was a little soft, and she couldn't stand on the ground. In a blink of an eye, she also fell down. Luoqiu and Yu Yi, who didn't feel anything strange about this, exchanged a look. Luoqiu said, "Let's go to the front and have a look." Yu Yi nodded, waving her hand in front of her. Then, a gray, translucent, strange light cover spread out, including Zhang Qingrui and Kai Wenji's soul. At this moment, Zhang Qingrui seemed to feel better, at least she could stand up. Luoqiu started to walk in the direction of Gao Rui's soul. He walked in the front, and the white bones on the road automatically scattered to both sides as he walked. This scene made Ms. Zhang, who was following behind him, speechless. These white bones were like the desperate ancient people, who had to kneel down on both sides of the road when they saw the noblest person. Luoqiu didn't know what the two behind him were thinking. He only saw that the speed of Gao Rui's soul being pulled seemed to be gradually accelerating, and the cyan light ahead became more and more intense. Except for Gao Rui's soul, they didn't see anything similar on the road. It's strange. Gao Rui's body should have fallen down at the beginning. Why didn't his soul be attracted until now? Yu Yi said beside Luoqiu, "Master, did you notice that Gao Rui had something like an amulet on his body?" Luoqiu recalled for a while, and vaguely remembered that there was something made of yellow talisman hanging on the chest of Gao Rui's body. Then he nodded. The servant girl, who was used to using modern words to let her new master understand things at the fastest speed, said in a low voice, "That thing still has some residual waves, which probably means protection. These tomb robbers often deal with cemeteries, so they bring those things for psychological comfort. Gao Rui himself may not know that it has the power of protection. Maybe he got it from somewhere. Maybe it's from a Taoist temple. If it wasn't from a Taoist temple, it was probably sold by a witch or a trickster. Master, here we are." Behind a huge stone pillar in front of them was the source of the cyan light. Looking from both sides of the stone pillar, they could clearly see a stone platform. On the stone platform there was a huge stone hall, and the stone pillar in front of them seemed to have separated it from the middle. Luocio's curiosity rose to the highest point after entering the tomb palace. He bypassed the stone pillar and walked forward. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 125. Genius 1 second. Remember love go/little? I will provide you with wonderful novels to read. If the one buried in the stone coffin was indeed the famous founder of the Way of Peace, the leader of the Yellow Turban Army, then he was probably the most important person Luocio had ever seen. His peaceful daily life had long been involved in the grotesque and variegated world. Now that he was able to see this famous historical figure, then he would more or less have similar opportunities in the future. Luocio had such a premonition. Then he would properly size up this person who had once caused the world to be in turmoil. It should be because the image of the evil Taoist Zhang Jiao in Kai Wenji's memory had an inestimable fear. Luocio's gaze swept past Kai Wenji's soul form. She was indeed an ancient beauty, but her current expression was not very good. At this time, Gao Rui's soul had already been absorbed into the stone coffin, and there had been no movement for some time. Luocio stretched out his hand to touch the coffin lid. However, just as he was about to touch the coffin lid, a dazzling azure light suddenly shot out from the gap between the coffin and the coffin lid. The intense green light instantly illuminated everything in the vicinity. An extremely strong force seemed to have erupted from the coffin, fiercely pushing the heavy coffin lid. At the same time, the azure light seemed to have reached its limit. In the midst of this intense azure light, a figure slowly stood up from the coffin. Gradually, it became clear that it was a withered face, wearing a red silk robe with black beast skin stuck to the sleeve. The head wore a conical pointed hat, and both hands were placed in front of the chest, in a clenched position. Between the two hands there was a strange object. It was neither gold nor stone nor jade, and the source of the azure light that illuminated the 3 floors of the tomb palace was this strange object in front of them. Divine stone, Zhang Jiao? As early as when the coffin lid was broken, Luocio calmly retreated. At this time, he looked at the scene in front of him and looked at Kai Wenji. Kai Wenji clenched her teeth and nodded heavily. Luocio looked up and down at this person wearing a hu robe. And, for the time being, there was no way to define whether this thing could be considered a person or not. Boss Luo could now clearly distinguish the difference between a normal person and a non-normal person. Who dares to disturb this king's sleep? Suddenly, the person in the coffin slowly opened his eyes. It was a pair of gray and muddy eyes. Luocio could not see any intelligence that a human should have in this pair of eyes. 1G. But once he opened his eyes, he would naturally see everything. The person in the coffin, or should he call him Zhang Jiao now? A solemn and slightly angry voice rang out. You dare to bring people into this king's tomb. This concubine. Kai Wenji's SS bodies' body. Inside the coffin, Zhang Jiao snorted coldly. Fine, I don't have enough living souls for my resurrection. All of you can become my helpers. Wait a moment. Seeing that the strange God stone in Zhang Jiao's hand suddenly shrunk, Yu Yi suddenly said, Before that, can you tell me what you're holding in your hand? My master wants to know. Can you tell us? Boss Luo was stupefied. He really wanted to ask about it. He felt that if this continued, he would completely degenerate into a useless person who did not even need to open his mouth. This is a divine item from heaven. It's fine if you ordinary people don't know it. Quickly offer it to this king. Zhang Jiao probably hadn't finished speaking yet, and he probably didn't have the chance to finish speaking now, because this ancient demon in the coffin, the vicious person who had stirred up chaos in the world, obviously didn't have time to react at this time, and flew out of the stone coffin. Back to the scene before Zhang Jiao flew out. The club's servant girl frowned slightly and appeared in front of Zhang Jiao at a speed beyond the limit of vision. She reached out and pressed on Zhang Jiao's chest. Like a truck after a collision, Zhang Jiao's eyes widened as he flew backwards, but his body eventually came to a halt in midair. His crimson clothes fluttered and he was full of anger. Unexpectedly, before he could find the woman who suddenly attacked him, he felt a huge force hit him from behind and his whole body hit the ground. The huge impact caused the back of the stone slab that was stuck here to instantly shatter. A thing like you, who is neither alive nor dead, dares to say offer in front of my master? Worm, do you know what is the real nobleness? It was a very, very soft voice. Love go little say, W. Chu. The voice was so soft that it seemed to be heard by the ear. Only Zhang Jiao could hear it. And he was attacked again, for the third time. She stepped on him fiercely again. The huge force passed through Zhang Jiao's body to the floor. The cracked stone slab was now broken and Zhang Jiao's body sank into the ground. Bitch, how dare you? If I had recovered, how could I let you? Ah! The servant girl stepped on Zhang Jiao's body again and said indifferently, there is no if. No matter how strong you were before, you are weak now. Seeing this powerful woman stepping on him again, Zhang Jiao's voice was a little flustered. Wait! About the God's Stone. I will tell you the truth. Yu Yi slapped Zhang Jiao and pushed him quite far away. From Luoqiu's position, he probably needed to look into the distance. Hearing the voice from the front, Zhang Qingrui said subconsciously, don't you want to help? Boss Luo had thought about it in his spare time. Since the club had harvested a wave of non-humans before he took over, it seemed that there would be times of struggle in the future. Then, if he used the word wizard to describe himself, he should be the kind of wizard who didn't have the heart for close combat. Even so, there would be times when his male hormones would be aroused occasionally. However, the servant girl beside him looked as if she couldn't wait to arrange everything for him properly and eliminate all problems from beginning to end. I don't think so, Luo Qiu said in an uncertain tone. Just when he finished, Yu Ye's voice came from the front, Master, you can come here now. Zhang Jiao, who used to call the wind and summon the rain, was now sitting on the ground awkwardly. Seeing the arrival of Luo Qiu, Zhang Jiao slowly opened his mouth. This thing is a gift from heaven. When I found it, there were strange flowers growing around it, and the grass and trees were providing shade. It was very magical that flowers and trees could be reborn. I searched all the ancient books but couldn't find out what it was, so I called it with the God's Stone. Zhang Jiao looked up at the God's Stone in his hand. After that, I studied it all day long and found that it could not only make withered trees come back to life, but also absorb the souls of living people. The more souls it absorbed, the greater the ability to revive withered trees. Zhang Jiao sighed. Back then, I used the art of changing fate to seize the body of the Xiongnu Sage King. But this was a heaven-defying act. I knew I didn't have long to live, so I searched for a way to save him. I've never seen anything as magical as this in my life. I refined this item with the method of cultivating magic tools. Heaven didn't let me down, and I gradually succeeded. I cultivated the underground palace and set up a soul imprisonment array. Tens of thousands of young boys and girls were trapped here. When my life was about to end, I was buried here. But I didn't expect that after 1,000 years, after this item absorbed a large amount of souls, not only was it unable to restore me, but its magical power was also gradually dissipating. But this item's absorption of souls became stronger and stronger, and now it's almost beyond my control. Even I'm living in fear now, resisting this item's invasion all day long. If I don't have a supply of fresh souls, it will continue to erode me. Zhang Jiao stretched out the God's Stone in his hand. If the two of you want this item, just take it. This item has begun to erode my spirit. If you don't take it, I can only vanish, Luoqiu said. I know a cultivator who is also pursuing the path of immortality. At first, I thought her methods were somewhat dishonorable. But now, it seems that compared to you, she's just a small child. Zhang Jiao didn't refute him since he was weaker. Luoqiu looked at Kai Wenji. His eyes were full of hope from the beginning, so he asked, "Where is Wei Zhongdao buried?" Zhang Jiao looked at Luoqiu in surprise. He didn't expect him to ask such a question. He looked at Kai Wenji, thinking about their relationship, and didn't speak for a long time. However, Miss Maid was not happy. She sneered beside Zhang Jiao. Zhang Jiao's expression changed, and he stammered, "Zhongdao. Zhongdao, my husband, how is my husband?" Kai Wenji waited for 1,000 years, but she couldn't see her husband again. Now that she had the chance, she was anxious. "For 1,000 years, my husband has been alone. Is he?" Zhang Jiao felt the great pressure from Yu Yi. He lowered his head and said, "Zhongdao won't be alone, and he doesn't have to be." "What are you talking about? Your husband died long ago." Zhang Jiao's voice was even softer. "I wanted to borrow the Wei family's wealth, so I used a spell to make you think that Zhongdao's life spirit is still in his body." Kai Wenji clenched her teeth. "I don't believe it." "Then, in the tomb palace, I can see him twice a year." Zhang Jiao said, "It's just a trick. Talking to you behind your back is just me." Like a thunderbolt from Qingtian, Kai Wenji took 2 steps back in a panic. She shook her head. If it was true, why did she persist 1,000 years ago, and why did she wait for him for 1,000 years? No, no, no. Kai Wenji held her head, and some of her eyes suddenly became extremely ferocious. In the soul state, her long hair spread out, and there was no trace of her ancient charm. In an instant, she looked like a ferocious female ghost. "You lied to me!" In the blink of an eye, Kai Wenji turned into a cloud of gray fog and rushed toward Zhang Jiao. Just when Luoqiu thought she was going to vent her anger on Zhang Jiao, the fog suddenly turned and swept away the god stone from Zhang Jiao's hand at an extremely fast speed. "My husband, I'm coming for you. These people are lying to me." A faint voice could be heard, and Kai Wenji had already gone to the other side of the tomb palace. Almost at this moment, the ground of the entire 3-story underground palace began to shake. Zhang Jiao said in a panic, "The underground palace was built together with the ley lines, and the god stone was refined into the eye of the array by me. It will never leave this place." Luoqiu frowned and said, "Speak clearly." "The spiritual energy accumulated in the ley lines for 1,000 years will erupt. The underground palace will be completely destroyed." Yin 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 Yin. Chapter 126. A Genius Remembers Love in 1 Second/Small? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Although it was said that they couldn't leave this place, the tremors suddenly became incomparably violent. The upper layer that was supported by the large number of stone pillars now began to crumble. Zhang Jiao suddenly began to scream miserably. His withered body began to melt as if it had been splashed with strong acid. And the melting speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the withered corpse had turned into a pile of bones. In the end, only a cloud of gray mist was left from the bones, as if it would dissipate at any moment. "Looks like he didn't hold on for too long." Yu Yi glanced at him and said, "Although that god stone is constantly trying to devour his soul, he can't actually leave the god stone. It's just that he doesn't know it." Luoqiu nodded. Feeling the strong vibration and the cracking of the ground, he quickly said, "Bring the professor and Gao Rui's bodies first." Yu Yi nodded and quickly went to the place the professor had left behind. Luoqiu glanced at eldest Miss Zhang, who had been frightened countless times today. He waved his hand and let her body float up. "I'll take you out. Don't be afraid." "Yes." After saying that, Luoqiu also walked in the same direction. When he passed by the huge sarcophagus, he stopped and looked into it. Then, he quickly reached out and seemed to grab something from the sarcophagus. Zhang Qingrui didn't see it clearly, so she didn't dare to ask. Luoqiu then sped up and met up with Yu Yi. At this time, Yu Yi had already grabbed the professor and Gao Rui's body with one hand and was ready to evacuate at any time. Luoqiu glanced back at the depths of the 3-story underground palace. Then, He waved his hand and gathered up Kai Wenji's skeleton. Even though the entire underground palace was shaking, it couldn't stop Kai Wenji's determination to find Wei Zhong's room. The God's Stone, which was the eye of the formation, had left. Those light wolves born from this formation naturally didn't appear anymore. Without the obstruction of the light wolves, it wasn't difficult for her to reach Wei Zhong's room. Love go little say, Chu there was no light in the cold room. But the God's Stone itself gave off a faint green light. Kai Wenji stopped in front of a small sarcophagus. She returned from her fog-like state to her humanoid soul form. She regained her ancient beauty and was no longer a frightening female ghost. How could she meet her husband with that hideous face with disheveled hair? Kai Wenji lowered her head and wept as she stared blankly at the stone coffin that had been sealed for thousands of years. Zhang Jiao's words, whether true or not. At this moment she had arrived. Husband, can you let Wenji see you? Kai Wenji's God's Stone. God's Stone's God's room God. The cold green light didn't change much. The most it changed was that it was pulling Kai Wenji from the beginning to the end. The God's Stone was like a flame to her. It was like ice hitting magma, weakening her soul all the time. She was like a moth to a flame. She would rather believe the lies from 1,000 years ago, regardless of the fact that the God's Stone could make her disappear. My husband, you still don't want to see me? Kai Wenji lay on the sarcophagus, weeping. She was like 1,000 years ago, kneeling outside the tomb palace for 3 days and 3 nights in order not to return to the land of Han. What's the use of having you? With grief, anger, despair, and everything she had been waiting for 1,000 years, Kai Wenji waved her hand and swept the God's Stone on the sarcophagus to the ground. It rolled, paused, and was picked up. The rolling God's Stone finally hit something. It hit Luochio's feet. He picked up the God's Stone and handed it to Yu Yi. Then, he pointed his finger, and the bones that had been floating behind him slowly floated to the front of the sarcophagus. Kai Wenji heard the movement and raised her head with tears in her eyes. Luochio didn't say anything. He just moved the lid of the sarcophagus and put the bones into the sarcophagus. You can be together now. Love go little say, Luochio felt that he wasn't good at speaking in this kind of situation, so he said simply, from another point of view. Since they were separated by life and death 1,000 years ago, at least they could be buried together after death 1,000 years later. After doing this, Luochio looked at the motionless Kai Wenji and chose to turn around and leave. The underground palace was shaking violently. He wasn't afraid of being buried alive, but it would be troublesome to get out the bodies of the professor and Gao Rui and Zhang Qingrui. Thank you, child Luo. This was the last voice of the ancient woman that boss Luo heard. She might have walked into the sarcophagus and fallen asleep quietly. Rumble! On the surface, in the huge pit, there seemed to be a huge circle of quicksand. It started to sink crazily from the center. The heavy equipment used for the excavation, the bodies of the treasure thieves, the countless bones on the first, second, third, and third floors of the underground palace, Kai Wenji, Wei Zhongdao, Zhang Jiao, and even the professor's past were all buried. It was sunrise now, and the grassland showed infinite scenery. The wind started to blow and began to sweep away the dust in the pit. Luochio stood at the edge of the pit, quietly looking at the rising sun. It turned out that they had already spent the night. Will they be disturbed again in the future? He didn't know when Ms. Zhang also came over. She was about 3 steps away from Luochio, and she was also looking at the sinking pit. Luochio knew who she was referring to, who knows. If they want to dig, they can still dig. Zhang Qingrui smiled bitterly. People die for wealth and birds die for food. Those treasure thieves, even if they weren't. Zhang Qingrui glanced back at the girl who was cleaning up the Wrangler and the bodies of the professor and Gao Rui. Even if they can enter the underground palace, I'm afraid they will die in vain. Luochio smiled and didn't say anything. Zhang Qingrui suddenly gritted her teeth. Luochio, I have something to discuss with you. Can you not erase my memory? You and that lady. I know you can do it. Why? Zhang Qingrui took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh air of the grassland. She stroked her hair under the strong wind, looking at Luoqiu. I don't want to forget the professor's story, what happened in the underground palace, and those treasure thieves, these days. She looked at the sinking pit. My life is peaceful. I'm not afraid you will laugh at me. These days, for me, are more nervous and exciting. I've never felt this way before. Although these past few days were dangerous, to the point where I could lose my life, but for the first time, I felt my heart beating so fast. For the first time, I breathed in the air that was different from the past. For the first time, I felt that being alive was so wonderful. I was afraid that I wouldn't remember. If I forgot, I would never feel this way again. Taking a deep breath, Zhang Qingrui closed her eyes and welcomed the rising sun. She smiled and said, "Maybe I won't encounter something like this in the future. I just hope that there will be something worth remembering in the future." She suddenly opened her hands. At the edge of the pit, the strong wind blew, as if she would fly away in the next moment. After a long time, Zhang Qingrui sighed, looking at Luoqiu. "It seems like I need to give you something to do. What should I give you?" "I'll make some changes. I'll erase myself and Yu Ye's memories, okay?" Luoqiu suddenly said, "If you remember us, I'll feel awkward." "That's better. After all, if I remember your things, I won't dare to be friends with you anymore." Zhang Qingrui nodded in agreement. This was exactly what she wanted. So she asked with expectation, "Is the price high?" "You've already given me one." Luoqiu smiled. Zhang Qingrui was stunned, showing a puzzled expression. Luoqiu said indifferently, "Take it as a reward for treating me in the underground palace. It's just a small piece of cake." Zhang Qingrui opened her mouth. "It may not be important for you, but it's not important for me either." Luoqiu imitated Zhang Qingrui, opening his hands at the edge, feeling that the wind could lift his body at any time. "The important thing is that you've separated." What should I do next?" Luoqiu walked to the wrangler, taking out a travel bag and taking out some things wrapped in newspaper. "First, make a call home." The professor probably didn't want to leave from the beginning," Luoqiu said indifferently, "so take your ID card and wallet with you." Zhang Qingrui took the things, turned on the phone, but turned it off immediately. "Can I send the professor off for the last time? I think he won't be so lonely if there's one more person to send him off." Luoqiu nodded. 1 or 2 days of memory alteration was not a big deal. "Last question." Zhang Qingrui blinked her eyes. "Since that magical stone can absorb people's souls, why only Kai Wenji's soul is fine after so many years?" This was found in Zhang Jiao's sarcophagus. Luoqiu took something out of his pocket and spread it in front of Zhang Qingrui. It was a comb. Zhang Qingrui was stunned, seeming to understand something, but she was not sure. Luoqiu said, "It should be a woman's comb." Yin. Chapter 127. Genius remembers love in 1 second/small? Shua.net provides you with wonderful novels to read. "Grandma, help me!" Suddenly, Zhang Lilanfang woke up from her dream with cold sweat all over her body. Her heart was beating fast and she breathed hard. She was frightened by the scene in the nightmare. It had been the 5th day, but Zhang Qingrui hadn't been found. She almost lost her composure. Zhang Lilanfang put on her pajamas and pushed open the door. "Prepare the car, prepare the car." The chauffeur, who woke up in a panic, hurriedly prepared the car and drove to Guyuzhai under the order of old madam. It was still dark. After returning to the shop, Zhang Lilanfang opened the door and walked towards the storeroom of the antique shop. "Wait for me here." The driver nodded and had to wait in the lobby. In front of the storeroom, Zhang Lilanfang hesitated for a moment. Finally, she took a deep breath and opened the security system. She had no choice. Her only granddaughter was her lifeblood. She couldn't wait any longer without any news. She seemed to be able to hear her granddaughter's screams one more day or one more hour. An old lady was so obsessed with her only family member that she was almost crazy. Even though she had a grudge, Zhang Lilanfang still came here personally, in front of the locked black card in the storage room. She took out the black card from the cabinet with trembling hands. No matter what you want me to do, I only want my to come back safely. The old madam held the black card tightly with both hands. But not long after, the old madam's expression changed dramatically. She suddenly exerted force with both hands and tore the black card apart. Looking at the black card that was easily torn apart by her, Li Lanfang's face suddenly showed a sharp and unusual coldness. Zhong family old bastard. I lent you the black card to extend your life, because of the sisterly relationship. You dare to lie to me. How dare you cheat me with a fake one? She had hidden the black card for dozens of years. It couldn't be destroyed by fire or cut by a knife. But the one in her hand was obviously fake. The old lady sat on the chair in the storeroom quietly. She lowered her head and didn't turn on the light. By the time Shi Shiji hurried over, it was already dawn. This was the first time he had seen such a frightening expression on the old madam's face in the past few decades. Shi Shiji looked around and found that many things in the storage room were broken on the ground. Shi Shiji hurried forward and asked worriedly, "Madam, what happened? Old bastard Zhong lied to me." "Shiji, you come with me to find him." Zhang Lilanfang raised her head, her eyes as terrifying as those of an evil ghost. Shi Shiji took a deep breath and said, "Understood. I'll go prepare it right away." When Zhang Lilanfang got on the car, the phone in her hand suddenly rang. It was Zhang Qingrui's number. Zhang Lilanfang accepted it. 1 minute later, she hurriedly said to the driver, "Wait, go to the airport." Outside the airport, Zhang Qingrui and her grandmother hugged each other and cried. Zhang Lilanfang was afraid that it was a dream. She held her granddaughter's face with both hands and looked at her pale face. Where did you go? Do you know that I, almost, Zhang Qingrui also had a lingering fear in her heart as she slowly recounted what had happened in the past few days. She only remembered what she had experienced. The entire underground palace collapsed suddenly. I took advantage of the chaos and finally escaped. Eldest Miss Zhang's face was still filled with fear. She grabbed her grandmother's hand and told her what had happened. In the back seat of the car, Zhang Lilanfang touched her granddaughter's face with tears in her red eyes. She kept saying, "It's okay, it's okay, it's okay as long as you're back." After the two enjoyed the joy of family reunion, Zhang Lilanfang sighed. 20 years ago, there was indeed an excellent team in the underworld. But all of a sudden, there was no news about them. I didn't expect that one of them was your university's supervisor. She shook her head. That Qin Fang was also a poor guy. Anyway, it's okay as long as you're back. Since Qin Fang died, there's no need to investigate. You can't tell others what you've seen in the underground palace. Do you understand? Zhang Qingrui forced a smile. Kai Wenji, Zhang Jiao, the underground palace and those light wolves. Nobody will believe me even if I tell them. Zhang Lilanfang said, "Some things in the world are not as clean as what we see on the surface. Before I married into the Zhang family, I've heard many more bizarre things, but there's no evidence." Old Mrs. Zhang shook her head. "Forget it. Let bygones be bygones. It's not important anymore. But, you said there was a treasure thief group. I have to ask about it carefully, in case it's a source of trouble." Zhang Qingrui recalled the memory in her mind. "I remember that man was called Snader. They were a group of people from different countries and seemed to be rich." Zhang Lilanfang nodded, patting Zhang Qingrui's hands. "Don't worry about it. This is our country. It's not a place for outsiders to act presumptuously. I have my own arrangement." Zhang Qingrui nodded. She suddenly bit her lips and plucked up her courage. "Grandma, I don't want to be with the Zhong family." Zhang Lilanfang kept silent for a while. Under Zhang Qingrui's uneasy gaze, she nodded slightly. "Really?" Zhang Qingrui looked at her grandmother in astonishment. The experience in these days was too magical, which made her stronger than before. Zhang Lilanfang looked at Zhang Qingrui. For me, you're the most important. Nothing can be compared with you. Besides, if you didn't mention it, I'd consider it carefully. Grandma? Zhang Lilanfang shook her head. Don't think about it now. I'll take you home to have a good rest. I've arranged your Uncle Shiji to take care of the shop for you temporarily. Don't go anywhere for the next few days. Stay by my side. Okay. In the basement of Qin Fang's house. After getting off the plane and seeing Zhang Qingrui get on the car, Luoqiu and Yu Yi came here. Since they were back in their own city, it was much easier to come to this place. But he didn't expect to meet Qin Chuyu here. After coming out from the underground palace, he didn't see her nearby. Qin Chuyu seemed to know that Luoqiu would come here again. The moment he and Yu Yi walked out, this extraordinary woman had been sitting here quietly with her eyes closed. The corpse in the basement had disappeared. It should have been dealt with by Qin Chuyu. Luoqiu looked at Qin Chuyu. I thought you'd send the professor off for the last time. Luoqiu didn't meet Qin Chuyu again from Gao Rui's hometown in front of Ulaanbaatar to the burial of the professor. Of course, if the Taoist cultivator was indifferent, then there was nothing to say. Qin Chuyu opened her eyes. I'm not Gao Rui's daughter. There's no need to send me off. Don't worry. I'm not interested in Qin Fang's property. I found his will in the safe here. I'll deal with it later and sell it. Then I'll send it to Gao Rui's real daughter. That year Gao Rui's daughter was replaced by Qin Chuyu. Of course, she was the only one who could be found. Of course, Luoqiu didn't care about the follow-up. He came here because there was still a corpse to be dealt with. The professor had been missing for so many days. If the school felt something was wrong, it would be discovered sooner or later. Luoqiu nodded. He didn't intend to say anything. He looked at Yu Yi meaning, go back. Wait a minute, please. Unexpectedly, Qin Chuyu stopped Luoqiu. She took out a simple wooden box and opened it in front of Luoqiu. This is the relic of a senior monk of Tibetan esoteric sect. I'll use it. How long can I stay with you? Boss Luo was stunned for a second. Even though customers would have some strange requests, Boss Luo didn't know what to say. But what the hell did she mean by staying with him? I shouldn't have woken up at this time, Qin Chuyu said indifferently, but the sudden breakthrough made my cultivation in this life almost wasted. And it also left some very bad traces. I need to stay with you and feel at all times. She took a look at Luoqiu and then at Yu Yi, saying seriously, I need to get rid of the fear in my heart so that I can continue my cultivation. It was good to have a guest who had made a deal. Why? Of course it was because they knew how to do it. They would directly throw out something they would pay for and then put forward a request. Luoqiu directly reached out and touched the relic. After thinking for a while, he said indifferently, 2 years. Chapter 128. Genius 1 second. Remember love divided by go divided by little? Sagnet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Boss Luo, who was taking off his shoes at the entrance, was immediately glared at by sub-editor Ren, who came over excitedly. Love Go Little Say, Net Corinne Xiling, with her arms akimbo, was quite imposing, but even a cat couldn't be scared away, let alone Luoqiu, who was already used to it. Without saying anything, Luoqiu changed into slippers, walked into the living room, got a glass of water, and sat on the sofa to drink. Sub-editor Ren, who had been following Luoqiu from the moment he entered the door until he sat down, couldn't bear it anymore. With a fake smile, she pulled Luoqiu's ear to her face. I say, you are ignoring me, right? Yes. F***ck. You really admit it? Ren Xiling opened her mouth in surprise, and the words in her stomach were abruptly stopped. However, as the current head of the household and the legal mother, Ren Xiling sneered, it seems that it's time for me to teach you how to be a human. Luoqiu first waved his hand to slap Ren Xiling's hand that was pulling his ear, and then took out a bag of beef jerky from his backpack. Ren Xiling took it, tore open the package, took out a piece and began to gnaw. Don't think that a bag of beef jerky will solve the problem. No one disappears like you. Didn't I send you a text message? Ren Xiling snorted. A short message and you disappeared just like that. Don't you feel embarrassed? Scenery photos should be available every day. Luoqiu again took out a bag of milk candy from his backpack. Ren Xiling snorted and tore open the packaging. She unwrapped a piece and threw it into her mouth. Don't think that a pack of milk candy and a pack of beef jerky can stop me. Therefore, Boss Luo turned the backpack over and put all the food on Subeditor Ren's legs. It's enough for you to eat until next week. Ren Xiling glared at him. Are you trying to make me fat? Luoqiu rolled his eyes as he massaged his shoulders and walked towards the room. I'm tired. If there's anything, we can talk about it tomorrow. At this time, Ren Xiling, who was tearing apart other local specialties, said, Oh right, your old Uncle Ma will be officially discharged the day after tomorrow. Let's have a meal together. Your Uncle Yi Yen will also take the time to come over. The door was closed. Uncle Yi Yen. Luoqiu turned on the light in the room. After a moment of silence, he suddenly walked to the wardrobe. After opening the wardrobe, he took out a box that was hidden in the wardrobe. He hadn't opened this box for a long time. Thinking of this, Luoqiu opened the box and took out the thing inside, tenor, a medium-tone saxophone. He stretched out his hand and touched the engraved words on the top of the tube. Happy birthday, from Yi Yen. Luoqiu smiled. He missed the days when he learned this instrument from that uncle. Subconsciously, Luoqiu picked it up and gently put it to his mouth. Yesterday once more. When the low but powerful music slowly came out of the living room, Subeditor Ren's anger suddenly disappeared. She smiled with relief. For the sake of these letters, I forgive you. Ren Xiling gently rotated the sweet candy on the tip of her tongue. Unconsciously, she also remembered some things that happened yesterday. Brat. Anyway, it was wet. Eyes. Shinshin Food Company, Limited, Office. Zhuge. Help me print this information. Okay. Right away. Zhuge. Remember to order lunch. Okay. Perhaps it was an illusion, but Zhuge seemed to be in a good mood these days. His clumsy body walked back and forth in the office. Suddenly, he became very diligent. He always rushed to finish the work before the end of the day and was the first one to leave the office immediately after the end of the day. The speed of rushing out of the office was like adding special effect. A curious colleague asked, Did something good happen? That's why he smiled like a pig when he went to the toilet. No, nothing. But no one got the answer. In short, Zhuge was the first one to leave the office successfully today. Zhuge's mood couldn't be simply described as good. It was honey. Yes, it was like eating honey every day. It was so sweet and he was never sick of it. Why? Every day when he came home from work, he could eat a hot meal. Even the moment he opened the door, Hanako would wait for him and put the slippers for him. The only thing left was to say, Do you want to eat first? Or take a shower first? Or, that's it. The originally messy house was messy every day when he came home, accompanied by various sour smells of single men. But now it was different. It was neat, clean, and even emitted a kind of fragrance all the time. When he went out in the morning, he could hear the words, Be careful on the road. When he came back in the evening, he could hear the opening words, Thank you for your hard work today. It was the same today. Zhuge showed a satisfied smile, eating the egg fried rice made by Nanako. Although Nanako seemed to only know how to cook egg fried rice, Zhuge felt that he would never get tired of eating it. Because, at this time, Nanako must be sitting opposite him, quietly looking at him. By the way, Nanako. Zhuge still couldn't look at this almost perfect girl properly. What's the matter? No, I just want to ask. Zhuge paused and said, Every time you watch me eat, aren't you hungry? Nanako shook her head, smiled sweetly and said, Because, to be able to watch Zhuge eat, I feel very happy. As if he was shot by Cupid's arrow, Juga felt that he was really going to die, a kind of feeling of dying without regret. It's almost time to put hot water for Juga to wash up. Nanako at this time quickly stood up and walked toward the bathroom. Speaking of washing up, Juga couldn't help but start to giggle, thinking about what happened these days. A man and a woman alone in a room, more or less he would have some thoughts of excessive hormone secretion. But every time he saw the almost perfect smile on Nanako's face, Juga had a feeling of pouring cold water on his head, feeling that this kind of thing was like blasphemy. He also began to think a lot of questions. For example, what should Nanako do in the future? Nanako appeared in front of him out of thin air, or it could be said that she walked out of the phone. She has no identity. How can a person with no identity live in the society? Can she only stay in this rented house for the rest of her life? If he is not at home, will Nanako feel bored and lonely? Thinking about it, Juga subconsciously asked, "Nai, Nanako? Will you be unhappy to be alone?" Nanako at this time stuck her head out, still smiling. "No, as long as I think that Juga will come back soon, I will be very happy. Sure enough, I can die without regrets. Such a good girl." Juga suddenly took a deep breath and said, How about we find time to go out for a walk?" Juga felt that it was too cruel to let such a beautiful girl hide in this small place, so he couldn't help but have the idea of taking her out for a walk. "Juga, where do you want to go?" Juga thought for a while and said, "This weekend, how about we go out for a walk?" "And I haven't thought about it yet, but I will definitely think about it. I'm looking forward to it. To go out with Juga." Nanako suddenly held her face and said shyly, "Is this a date?" Chapter 129. Genius 1 second. Remember love/go/little? Shua Net provides you with wonderful novels to read. Chinshuyu felt a little bad. She subconsciously looked at the thing she was holding in her hands, a set of clothes. To be exact, it was a set of clothes similar to what the woman in front of her was wearing, a maid's suit. "Although I think it's enough for me to serve the master alone, it's totally enough, very enough. But since you, as a guest, bought the time to stay with the master," Yuyi said with a smile, "so, you can stay in the club for 2 years. And, because you didn't explain too much, you can only move in the lobby, the kitchen, and your room. You can't enter the lower 3 floors of the club." Chinshuyu didn't intend to explore this place at first. Her idea was very simple. 500 years ago, she made a deal with the former boss, and it was also the first time she felt that horrible door from the former boss. But at that time, her cultivation time was still short, so she didn't have a very intuitive understanding. Although she was frightened, it didn't affect her much. But now, she was no longer the weak Taoist cultivator of that time. If she didn't meet Luochio when she woke up with broken cultivation in this life, she would probably just waste her cultivation in this life, and she could just start all over again. But this was the second time she felt that horrible door. This was not as simple as broken cultivation. Chinshuyu had entered the secular world to cultivate many times in the past 500 years. She was no longer the same as before. Her Taoist heart had been polished very well. However, it was broken by that weird door. Her Taoist heart became shaky and showed signs that all her previous efforts would be wasted. So she had to do something to stabilize her Taoist heart. The best and the simplest way was to face the source of this fear. So when Yuyi said she could only move in a limited number of places, Chinshuyu didn't feel unhappy. But what was the matter with this set of clothes? But she soon knew the answer. "But, even if you, as a guest, bought the time to stay with the master," this was the second time Yuyi emphasized this matter. Chinshuyu silently looked at the excessively beautiful and indifferent face in front of her. Although she didn't express too much, her tone obviously contained dissatisfaction with this kind of request. "But that doesn't mean you can eat and stay here for free." Yuyi finally explained what she meant. "So from now on, until the time limit of your purchase expires, you will stay here as a temporary worker. I allow you to follow me and serve my master. After hearing that, Qin Shu frowned as she felt something was wrong. Why can't I stay here as a guest? That Sarira is my transaction fee. I can stay here for a long time and enjoy your services. The servant girl said with a smile, Miss Qin, have you forgotten what you asked for at the beginning? What you said was only to buy time to stay by master's side. Of course, if Miss Qin wants to regain her status as a guest, I won't mind. However, based on your request when you made the deal, I think you can stay for the next 2 years. It's just that you can only sit at the entrance. After all, that place can be considered as staying by master's side. So this was the 3rd time he had mentioned it? As expected, he was very dissatisfied, right? She had made a mistake. She didn't expect this girl, who was gentle in front of the new boss, was such a scheming person. Qin Shu sighed in her heart. Unfortunately, the contract has been completed. She had a feeling that she had dug a hole and jumped into it herself. Qin Shu exhaled slowly, nodding her head. Where's the dressing room? I've cleaned up the utility room at the end of the 2nd floor. From now on, you can live there. Yu Yi smiled. Is this the reason why Qin Shu looks like this now? Luoqiu, who was sitting in front of the counter, had just finished listening to the servant girl's retelling of the cause and effect. He subconsciously looked at Qin Shu, who was wiping the glass of the cabinet by the window. Well, how should he put it? Although she was expressionless, maintaining her usual indifference to Luoqiu since she regained the memory of Yusanyang, she was still wiping the glass. But why did she feel that she was being bullied? She felt bitter in her heart but didn't say anything. Master, you don't like Miss Qin's clothes? Yu Yi suddenly asked. In Luoqiu's eyes, Yu Yi should be the type who had a strong interest in dressing up. But now it seemed that she was not only interested in dressing up herself. Luoqiu subconsciously looked at the clothes he was wearing, which was also chosen by Yu Yi, shaking his head. Just do as you say. He brought the tenor from home today, dismantled it and started to examine and repair the parts one by one. Yu Yi just stayed by his side quietly. Suddenly, the bell in front of the door rang, but it wasn't a guest who came in. It was Taiyinzi. The old guy still had that weird mix-and-match style, but the catfish-like beard on his face had been shaved off. Well, unexpectedly, he actually looked good. Master, you're finally back. These days I'm Yusanyang. Taiyinzi said the first half of the sentence respectfully, but the latter half was filled with anger, pointing at Qin Shu and laughing wildly. B*TCH? 500 years. Finally, I meet you. Ha 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 ha. Black gas rolled around the furious Taiyinzi, as if it was blessed with special effects. 500 years. B*TCH. You made me unable to see the sun for 500 years. It's time to settle the score. Go to hell. Taiyinzi stepped on the Big Dipper steps, pinching a seal with both hands, and the black gas around him rolled around like dark clouds under the gale. His afro hair was also swaying unsteadily. Heaven and earth have the right laws, the Jade Emperor controls the golden light. With a furious roar, Taiyinzi pushed out the seal with both hands at the same time. At this moment, the black gas around his body rushed out like a gale, like toppling mountains and overturning seas, like thousands of soldiers and horses, like hundreds of riders charging, like riding alone. After leaving Taiyinzi's side, the surging black gas turned from strong to weak, slower and weaker. Finally, it disappeared before it touched Qin Shu. It was as light as the clouds and the wind. Taiyinzi was stunned, looking at the seal with both hands blankly. He didn't believe it. Heaven and earth have the right laws, the Jade Emperor controls the golden light. He pinched the seal again and pushed it out crazily. The black gas gushed out again, but this time, it didn't go too far. The old ghost stood there blankly, as if he had received a huge blow. Then, he remembered. He had turned into a black soul now, so he didn't have any of the magic power he had when he was a cultivator. The black gas that gushed out was merely something that he had forcefully exhaled. In fact, it was like a fart. But Chinchuyu revealed a disdainful sneer after being hit by Tai Inzi twice in a row. This is King embarrassing. Little junior sister, it's been 500 years, how are you? Chapter 130. A Genius Remembers Love in 1 second/small? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. At first, it was because he had met his enemy from 500 years ago, and he was enraged. When Taiyinzi realized that he could only release some useless black smoke, he was naturally embarrassed. However, he didn't panic completely. After calming down, Taiyinzi began to think quickly about the situation in front of him. He realized that the current situation was a little grim. Why would Yu Sanyang appear here? Why does she look like she's working hard? Why is she wearing the same clothes as Miss Yuyi? Master, Taiyinzi could only look at Luoqiu. Although I don't know if your Jade Emperor's golden light was originally very powerful, but can you withdraw your posture now? Luoqiu put down the rag in his hand. This is Miss Qin, the Yu Sanyang you knew back then, and she will live here for the next 2 years. Don't bother her for the next 2 years. I like peace and quiet. Master, this lowly servant has the heart of a snake and scorpion. How could you? Taiyinzi was furious. However, before he could finish his sentence, a strange black flame suddenly appeared under his body. He heard Yu Yi coldly say, Taiyinzi, have you forgotten your own identity? Are you questioning Master's orders? As the black flames gushed out, Taiyinzi sensed the terrifying aura that made him tremble. He finally realized that the gap between him and this seemingly weak girl was only the tip of the iceberg. He instantly trembled and lowered his head, suppressing his anger and hatred towards Chinchu. This subordinate dares not. Behave yourself and remember your current status. This subordinate understands. Taiyinzi didn't dare to say anything, these black flames were too terrifying. At this moment, Luoqiu felt that Yu Yi seemed to have played the role of the bad guy, so he looked at her and said, I'm a little thirsty. Yu Yi hurriedly withdrew the black flames, turning around lightly. Yu Yi understands. Master, please wait a moment, I'll prepare right away. Luoqiu nodded. Miss Maid not only walked into the back hall, but also called Chinchu over. Luoqiu looked at Taiyinzi, who didn't dare to move. She's only going to stay here for 2 years. Come here. It seemed that some information had been revealed. Hearing this, Taiyinzi hurriedly raised his head, walking to Luoqiu's side. Luoqiu continued to wipe the parts he dismantled from the saxophone. Before I left, I asked you to watch over Zhuge. What happened these days? Taiyinzi hurriedly said, according to Master's order, this old Taoist. I've been observing Zhuge's actions these days. Master, this guy doesn't make any progress. Even if a beauty falls into his arms, he doesn't do anything. He just smiles like a fool every day, as if he's already satisfied. This kind of guy was simply a complete piece of trash. Master, I really regret to have found such a patron. Please give me another chance. I'll definitely find a first-class patron. Luoqiu said indifferently, Oh? You're denying your first achievement so soon? No matter what, he's already used the most precious thing of ordinary people as the transaction fee. Taiyinzi said with a sad face, but that's just the most common soul. Alas, this old Taoist deliberately influenced him and humiliated him at the same time, arousing the hatred in his heart. Taiyinzi then glanced at Luoqiu, saying thoughtfully, I've heard Black Soul number 9 say that a soul with strong hatred, sadness and other negative emotions is also a kind of high-quality soul. I didn't expect that Waste didn't have any intention of revenge, but actually made such a request. So far, Luoqiu hadn't seen a soul with strong hatred, but now they were discussing Zhuge's problem. Boss Luo suddenly said, Taiyinzi, Do you feel that the quality of your soul is not high because you didn't manage to make Zhuge hate you, so your first achievement is only average, so you feel a little uncomfortable in your heart? As expected, Black Soul couldn't hide in front of the boss, so Taiyinzi had to nod. Performance, only with good performance could he obtain stronger abilities from the club. It wouldn't be like just now, where he almost suffocated to death, but only managed to blow out a breath. It was simply too embarrassing. He couldn't keep this 500-years-old face, especially in front of his biggest enemy. That kind of feeling was needless to say. Then how about we make a bet? Luochio suddenly said. Taiyinzi was stunned. A bet? Luochio said softly. I bet that Zhuge can become an excellent customer. Taiyinzi hesitated. This, Luochio's eyes turned. If Zhuge still maintains his original appearance, I'll deduct 50 years of your service time. But if Zhuge becomes a little better, you'll have to add another 50 years of service time. Taiyinzi was really fed up with the feeling of being under others everywhere in this place. Especially at that moment, after witnessing the horror of Miss Maid, Taiyinzi's dream of walking to the top of the world fell back somewhat. Obviously, if he could free himself from this oppressive place a few decades earlier, it would also be a good thing. After thinking about it, if he won the bet, he would gain 50 years of service time. Even if he lost, he would only be enslaved for another 50 years. Anyway, he would be enslaved for the next 500 years, so he didn't care about another 50 years. Okay. I'll bet on it. I hope the master won't hurt me. Let time pass by. I only care about you. I'm willing to be infected with your aura. How long is life to be able to find a bosom friend? When he took out the key and was about to open the door, Zhuge heard a voice from inside the door. At this moment, there was only Nanako in the rented house. Zhuge was stunned. Turned out that Nanako liked to listen to this kind of old song. The sound of the stereo in the rented house should have heard the sound of the door opening, so the sound suddenly stopped. Zhuge soon saw Nanako walking quickly. You're back, Zhuge. Zhuge quickly nodded and handed the food and vegetables he bought from the supermarket to Nanako. He was not as nervous as he was at the beginning. Zhuge could now speak naturally and fluently in front of Nanako. The food is ready, come and eat. It's ready again? Zhuge was stunned. He had some thoughts in his mind, but he had been restraining himself from thinking about it, let alone asking about it. He was afraid that the doubts in his mind would eventually become a key. He still felt that he was in a fantasy fairy tale. He was afraid that the key would open the door of this fairy tale dream and bring him back to reality again. Let time pass by, no matter what it was, as long as it was Nanako, it was enough. What's wrong? You keep looking at me without eating. Do you not like to eat? Nanako looked at Zhuge's motionless appearance with some disappointment. Zhuge shook his head. No, I just thought about where we're going tomorrow. Really? Yes. No matter what it was, as long as it was Nanako, it was enough. Zhuge nodded lightly and revealed a smile. Yen PS1. Plan update 1/2. PS2. Thank you to the first leader of this book, Shueisheng. Chapter 131. Genius 1 second. Remember love go/small? Shua.net provides you with wonderful novels to read. As a result, the only place he could think of was the park. Originally, he planned to buy some new clothes with Nanako, but Zhuge, who always bought clothes online, had ordered some with Nanako a few days ago. He didn't want to spend his first important date in a random ready-made clothing store. More importantly, a man who had never visited a physical clothing store didn't know where to look for cheap, affordable, and beautiful women's clothes. Eating. Nanako didn't seem to eat much, so Zhuge subconsciously ignored this problem. As for watching movies, because I don't have much to spend and often stay at home, although the rental house is very small, it has unexpectedly installed a high-performance projector. During this period of time, as long as I'm at home, I've spent most of my time watching movies, right? He had no interest in life and didn't know what to do on a date with a girl. While he was working, he kept looking for strategies on the internet, but he couldn't understand most of them. The final destination that he understood was a hotel and other places that were convenient to move around. He swallowed his saliva. The main thing was that he knew how to read the atmosphere and take the initiative. Even if he simply walked in a quiet place like a park, he could quietly walk to a deserted place and then #yen%su. Damn, what am I looking at? Zhu Gu scooped up a handful of water from the wash basin in the toilet and splashed it on his face to wash his face. Then he began to fiddle with his hair again. He specially combed his hair to look like an adult. He also intended to wear a handsome suit, but he found that he actually didn't have such a thing. Zhuge looked at the mirror, patting his cheeks slightly hard, and then took a deep breath, walking out of the park's public toilet. He couldn't let Nanako wait outside for too long. Nanako, have you waited for a long time? It's okay. Nanako smiled. Where are we going next? Zhuge quietly glanced at the path leading to a quiet place in the woods, swallowing his saliva, and then suddenly pointed to the other side of the park for tourists to enjoy the flowers. Let's go there, okay? Haha, is it? As long as you like it, then let's go. Zhuge took a deep breath, walking in front. What woods? He didn't even have the courage to hold hands, although it seemed that Nanako wouldn't mind something like that. What the hell? Tai Inzi, who had a sharp afro, looked impatiently at the action pattern of his first customer. He couldn't help but think, this guy is as timid as a mouse. He wants to have sex but doesn't have the guts. He is so timid that he, the Black Soul Envoy, is anxious. However, Tai Inzi soon felt relieved. Who cares? In the end, this guy would continue to be like this. He didn't expect Zhuge to have any changes. In this way, he would be able to win the bet with the club's boss. 50 years. But he was still unhappy. He kept staring at such a good-for-nothing. Tainzi followed him impatiently. But why did the boss bet with me? Although it seemed that his side had a higher chance of winning, Tai Inzi didn't think that the club's owner was kind enough to find an excuse to reduce his enslavement time. That was why he made such a bet. Is there something I don't know? Thinking of this, Tai Inzi couldn't help but start to plan something. The red Mini was driving slowly on the road. The reason why Ren Xiling could be seen following the traffic rules was that Officer Ma's car was following behind. Of course, the driver was Officer Ma's wife, who didn't drive often. Ren Xiling was also afraid of being scolded. She just picked up Officer Ma from the hospital and was now at the restaurant where they agreed to celebrate his discharge. Why did you choose such a far place? Ren Xiling said casually. How would I know the place your Uncle Yi chose? Ren Xiling looked ahead. I can't say that your Uncle Yi is actually still in the mission, so the place where we eat this time is actually next to his squatting spot. As long as the mobile phone is connected to the monitor, he can work and be lazy, right? But since he replaced her, it's been so long, is that guy still squatting at home and not going downstairs? Ren Xiling couldn't help but think secretly. But she promised Yi Yen that she wouldn't intervene in this matter. By the way, do you remember where you used to live in the bun shop? Ren Xiling suddenly said. Yes. Ren Xiling said as if chatting. 2 days ago, I passed by the old town for an interview and wanted to walk there. The former boss and lady of the bun shop seemed to have passed away. But his son left his job in the city and came back alone to inherit the bun shop. Luoqiu nodded, turned on the car stereo, and said softly before closing his eyes, if there is time, go back and walk. Well, okay. Next time, let's talk about your girlfriend. Drive. Tut. In the memory, Yi Yen was not the kind of Iron Man, and naturally, he was not the middle-aged fat like Officer Ma. What should he say? It should be said that there was no difference from the memory. He still liked to wear a simple black windbreaker. When he was young, Luoqiu remembered that Yi Yen was already dressed like this. He was still as calm and handsome as before. Yi Yen had already booked a room in the restaurant. When Luocio and company opened the door and came in, he was quietly brewing tea by himself. F*ck, Yi Yen, what kind of crappy place did you find? The mountain is long and the river is far, you want me to die from the heat. Officer Ma, who had just been discharged from the hospital, probably had been stifled in the hospital for too long. At this time, he directly opened a can of cold beer, ignored his wife's nagging, and drank most of it in one breath. He casually sat down and continuously pulled at his collar. Uncle Yi. Yi Yen chuckled, then looked at Luocio. His eyes softened a bit and he softly said, "You're here." In Ren Xiling's eyes, she unexpectedly found that Luocio was actually a bit reserved or even nervous. She knew this kid's character too well. Should she say that he was an old man or a mature young man? Anyway, no matter who he met, he could use facial paralysis to talk. Subeditor Ren suddenly felt a bit lost. Sure enough, this guy who came back from France has a very special position in her baby's heart. As a mother, I can't compare? Don't stand, sit. Yi Yen smiled again, pointed to the seat next to him and said, "Sit next to me." Yen PS1. Plan update 2 halves. Chapter 132. Genius 1 second. Remember love go/little? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Officer Ma Howd was an honest person. A bottle of cold beer obviously couldn't quench his cravings after being squatted in the hospital for so many days. Thus, after begging, he finally got a bottle of 52 proof paper from his wife. He said that since it was Yi Yen who paid for it, it didn't matter how expensive it was. Because this guy's salary was higher than his bonus was more than his, and his grades were better than his. Ma Howd didn't have the slightest bit of jealousy. Instead, he was really happy for this good brother of his. He was proud of his achievements and sincerely said that Yi Yen was the second person he admired in his life. He drank nearly 2/3 of the bottle of paper alone. Luocio couldn't remember how long it had been since he sat in such a lively scene for more than an hour. He, who always liked to be alone, obviously didn't feel any discomfort. It was as if he was suddenly knocked down from a lonely peak, like a child who had just learned how to climb a mountain. He drank the tea that Yi Yen got from who knows where, and listened to the people at the table talking about things he had heard before and things he had never heard before. However, the words were getting more and more interesting. But there was no mention of a certain taboo word in everyone's heart. Luocio knew that he was the youngest here. Everyone was taking his feelings into consideration, so he held back and didn't say anything that could really touch their emotions the most. After 3 rounds of drinking, Ma Howd probably really drank too much. He suddenly knocked his chopsticks on the glass, burped, and stood up shakily. Everyone listen. During this time, I really have to thank my wife for taking care of me every day. He originally thought that he wanted to use this as an excuse to continue drinking, but he didn't expect that to be the case. In order to thank my wife for her hard work, I've decided to sing a song. Ren Xiling cursed on the spot. She had also drunk 2 or 3 glasses of white wine, and her face was flushed red. At this moment, she hurriedly covered her ears with both hands and hid far away. However, Ma Howd didn't seem to mind at all. After glaring at him, he walked to the TV in the private room and started to pick a song. He picked up the microphone and said, "In the past few days in the hospital, there's a place upstairs that plays a song that I like very much. It makes my heart itch. I'll sing it for you right now. Don't laugh, don't laugh." He was Officer Ma, a sharpshooter and a heavy smoker in the police station. In fact, when he was young, he was also a tyrant in the KTV room. This restaurant had some history. The decoration was still in the style of more than a decade ago, and the display screen was still the same. The so-called KTV was naturally incomparable to a professional KTV room. But this was probably a memory of their time. Luocio saw that although Officer Ma's wife had a mocking expression on her face, Her eyes were filled with anticipation. Yi Yan didn't look at her. He lowered his head and played with the 2 glasses that he hadn't finished after drinking a few mouthfuls. If I hadn't met you, where would I be? How would my life be? More than a decade ago, or long before he was born, there was probably such a scene. A group of people, fooling around. People say that 10 or 20 years is a cycle of change. Luochu felt that their time was actually still here. I'll send old Ma back first. Yi Yan, if you have time, come to sister-in-law's house. I'll make your favorite sweet and sour carp. Ma Hao staggered out with the support of his wife. Luochu asked for a blanket from the waiter and covered Rin Xiling's body. This woman later drank and fell asleep on the sofa. This woman is really difficult to take care of. Yi Yan made a pot of hot tea and asked Luochu to sit down beside him again, but she still said that she would take care of you for a lifetime. Luochu didn't say anything. He had heard the first sentence from Ma Hao many times. But the second sentence was obviously the first time he heard it today. Yi Yan took a sip of hot tea. You're not like your father. You're like your mother, the one who's not around. Luochu had almost no memory of his birth mother. He only heard from his father that she was probably a completely different type of woman from Rin Xiling. But he didn't want this meeting to fall into such a heavy atmosphere, so he smiled and said, "It seems I should exercise more." Yi Yan looked seriously at Luochu's eyes. They were serious and old-fashioned, like a stone statue. But he suddenly laughed. He suddenly reached out and pinched Luochu's nose and said, "I thought you forgot how to joke." Luochu was stunned. The number of times he had joked in the past few years could be counted on one's fingers. It couldn't be described with words. Yi Yan shook his head and suddenly said, "Are you still playing with guns? The membership card of the shooting club that I gave you is for life." Luochu thought about it. He did touch 2 guns during this period of time, and they were real guns. One was Jin Zifu's gun and the other was the nun's gun. So, he nodded. Yi Yan said again, "What about the saxophone?" Luochu also nodded. Yi Yan touched himself and said softly, "I have only held a gun in the past few years. That day, his father died in the mission. On the same day, another female agent in the same team died of serious injuries 2 days later." Looking at the expression on Yi Yan's face, Luochu knew that even though a few years had passed, the female agent who died was still Yi Yan's most beloved person. Another day, Yi Yan looked at Luochu and said with a smile, "When I am free, accompany me to shoot a few guns." Okay. From Taiyinzi's point of view, Zhuge was probably a hopeless man. Old Ghost tried his best to integrate himself with this era, but no matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't adapt to everything in this era. Taiyinzi felt that the people in this era, especially the men, had completely lost the masculinity and ambition of 500 years ago. A real man should shed blood when he is alive. However, even though he knew this guy was a hopeless man, the bet was still a bet. This kind of thing was hard to determine until the very last moment. If Zhuge changed even a little bit, there was a possibility that he would lose. Since that was the case, why not let him wake up from this beautiful dream? Taiyinzi quietly left Zhuge with a sinister smile on his face. Zhuge, who was strolling in the park, was thinking hard about what he should talk about. He really didn't have any experience in this area. There were a lot of people like him in society who didn't know what to say when they were with girls. Nanako, are you tired?" After thinking for a long time, Zhuge finally squeezed out such a sentence. "Nope. That's true, actually we didn't walk for long." Zhuge awkwardly touched his head. What should I say? No matter what the question was, although Nanako would answer immediately, but after answering, Zhuge suddenly didn't know how to continue. Sure enough, it's really hard to get along with girls. Let's go over there and sit. Okay. Cheer up. Zhuge silently cheered himself on, but at this moment, suddenly like it was raining, his hair that was combed into an adult's look was suddenly wet. Zhuge was stunned and looked at the sprinkler in the flower trough. It actually broke at this time, and crazily sprayed water, which even fell on his head. It really looked like it was raining. "Wah, let's go," Juga subconsciously shouted. "I'm wet, I'll go over there to wipe it." At this time, Nanako suddenly lowered her head, and trotted away from Juga's side. Juga was stunned. It was the first time he saw Nanako so flustered. What exactly is Nanako? There was no toilet nearby. He saw Nanako ran behind a tree, and subconsciously walked there. Taking a deep breath, he didn't know why the curiosity in his heart suddenly increased. Juga didn't know what drove him, and carefully peeped at the side. Nanako shouldn't have noticed, right? Looking at Nanako squatting on the ground, Juga's eyes peeped bit by bit. All of a sudden, Juga felt his heart beating crazily. That kind of fear almost made him scream out loud. Juga's hands simultaneously covered his mouth, and suddenly squatted down, no longer daring to look at what he saw. Instinctively, he felt a kind of fear. What he saw was Nanako squatting on the ground, but her head was separated from her body. She was slowly wiping her face. Not human, yin. Chapter 133. Genius 1 second. Remember love / little? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Luochio looked at Juga quietly. When the customer came, no matter what he did, he couldn't refuse. It was about 3:30 in the afternoon. "That is to say, you left Nanako here and came here right away, didn't you?" Juga shook his head. "No. I didn't dare to look at her at that time, so I found an excuse to go home and another excuse to come out." "In that case, Miss Nanako must feel very disappointed." Juga was silent for a while with shock, and then said with a trembling voice, What is she? Why can? He really didn't want to recall the scene he saw not long ago, and hoped to hear the answer he wanted to hear from this strange shop owner. Clay. Luochio didn't intend to hide, because he didn't ask before, he didn't tell him. Now that he asked, he would tell him. The club had always been honest. Clay? Juga opened his mouth, full of disbelief. How can it be? Customer, do you think that Nanako who has appeared in front of you is also impossible? I'm not. Juga shook his head, and then said angrily, but what I paid was, Luochio suddenly said indifferently, Customer, do you need me to evaluate the value of what you paid? Our club does have a set of evaluation standards for the customer's soul. Juga was startled, and suddenly had an inexplicable fear. He was afraid to hear some facts from the shop owner, something he could almost always hear from his childhood. I'm not. I'm just. He suddenly didn't know what he wanted to express, because Nanako was made of clay, so he angrily questioned? But recalling his request, he only wanted Nanako to return to his side, and didn't define what Nanako was. Originally, it was just a virtual character in a mobile game. Just clay. Juga suddenly understood why Nanako never ate in front of him, why she only knew how to cook egg-fried rice, why he never touched her when she was washing. Even in the park, after being wet by the water, she became so flustered. Nanako was afraid that if she got wet, her body would melt, would scare him? Was she thinking like this? Juga swallowed his saliva, and finally asked what he really wanted to know, does she have her own thoughts? It had been some time since Nanako appeared in reality. Hanako would always accompany him. She would watch him eat, watch movies with him, chat with him on the internet, and even play games with him. She never felt bored. This was very abnormal to begin with. This was originally abnormal. Yes, how could there be such a girl, who quietly took care of everything, and always maintained that sweet smile? Isn't this what you want, customer? Luochio said, someone who cares about you, who is willing to chat with you, and who won't look down on you. Juga suddenly became silent. All of a sudden, he felt an unprecedented irritation. That was, even if he was ridiculed by the people around him, even if he was directly rejected after confessing to a girl in puberty, even if he was just a small role in the office. He had never felt this irritation. I'm going back. Zhuge suddenly stood up, and walked toward the club's door without looking back. Welcome again, customer. When Zhuge walked out of the door, he heard his boss's voice behind him. He paused for a moment, but in the end, he didn't say anything. He pushed the door open and walked out. Zhuge didn't make any deal on his second visit. Yu Yi came over, holding the scented tea that Zhuge didn't drink, and put it on the tray held by Qinqiu. Qinqiu didn't say anything, silently turning around and leaving. She still didn't understand why she was doing this kind of work. There's no improvement. Yu Yi was now beside Luoqiu, saying softly, but it's a bit strange to be suddenly wet by the spray. Luoqiu took off his mask, and then held the teacup, thinking about the bet he made with Taiyinzi, suddenly asking, 50 years should be very long, right? Maybe it wasn't long for Yu Yi, but for Luoqiu, 50 years was twice as long as his life. Yu Yi only answered Luoqiu's question with a smile. Forget it, let's not talk about this. Luoqiu shrugged. By the way, how's the research on the God Stone going? After leaving the underground tomb palace in Ulaanbaatar, the God Stone was handed over to Yu Yi for safekeeping. Boss Luo, who had always been good at housekeeping, naturally felt that it was more cost-effective to let the knowledgeable servant girl study it than to spend time to identify it himself. Yu Yi didn't disappoint. At present, according to Zhang Jiao's description, it's been tested for radioactivity and material analysis. The material shouldn't be known. In addition, the radioactivity had a very active period. I detected a very weak ray, which can speed up the metabolism of cells. So it can come back to life? Luoqiu asked curiously. Yu Yi nodded. Well, yes. But the radioactivity on the God Stone has been declining. I think it's the characteristic of the ray itself. It can't be released forever. In general, this may be a meteorite falling from outer space. Meteorite. Luoqiu nodded. What's with the soul absorption? Yu Yi said, it should be the instinctive reaction of the meteorite itself. If the soul is also regarded as a spirit, what it absorbs is actually something like spirit waves. What's interesting is that this meteorite seems to be breeding a very special life. It's alive? Luoqiu was surprised. Yu Yi said with uncertainty, it's hard to say. I've never seen such a thing. But it shouldn't have its own consciousness. Even if it absorbs spirit power, it seems to be just an instinctive reaction. Maybe this is the key to its birth? Next, I plan to do another X-ray fluorescence spectrum and extreme general analysis. If there are further findings, Yu Yi will tell Master immediately. So Boss Luo, who didn't understand what X-ray fluorescence spectrum and extreme general analysis were, could only nod. As the boss, he more or less felt a little awkward in front of a prodigy. Well, I'll go out for a while. Ren Xiling was still sleeping in that restaurant. Zhuge put his hand on the door handle of his rented house, but couldn't open the door for a long time. He didn't know what he was hesitating about, he just felt that his mind was blank. The scene he saw kept lingering in his mind. But the door was opened at once. As usual, Nanako stood at the door. Zhuge, you're back. Zhuge stared blankly at this sweet smiling face, but his body instinctively took a small half-step back. Zhuge, what's wrong with you? Nanako looked at him confusedly. Are you not feeling well? Nanako stretched out her hand, touching Zhuge's forehead. That face that had once made him feel incomparable happiness was getting closer and closer, but the scene of the head being cut off also became incomparably clear in his mind at the same time. Clay, all of a sudden, she seemed to have turned into a pile of mud standing upright in front of Zhuge. A pile of mud approaching him. Horrifying. Closer and closer, closer and closer. Don't. Almost instinctively, or perhaps out of the fear in his heart, Zhuge subconsciously waved his arm, slapping away the hand that was about to touch his forehead. Zhuge. Nanako stared at this scene in a daze. The sweet smile seemed to disappear. Did you see it at the park? Zhuge also stared at his hand in a daze. What on earth, I step back, step back, step back. Juga felt a burst of dryness in his mouth, turned around and ran down the stairs like crazy. Juga. When he was downstairs, he seemed to have heard a sobbing voice calling out to him, but all he wanted to do was to run as far away as possible. His happiness seemed to have been shattered in an instant. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 134. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by small? The internet provides you with wonderful novels to read. What am I doing? Wandering in the city streets at night, Juga suddenly lost his goal. Go back? Or not? This question has been lingering in his mind. Aimlessly walking to the nearby commercial street, Juga sat on the bench for customers and habitually turned on his phone. After the game's app was deleted by his colleague, he didn't download it back. He didn't feel weak anymore. And now, he was even more irritated. You have logged in your account. Although the game was deleted, the game's discussion platform software was still there. It was full of die-hard fans of the game. Originally, he himself was also a member of this discussion platform. The game will have a new version update and maintenance next week. Please prepare to save your data and log off early. This update will add a new character, Monster Girl. At the top was a content about the game update, and below it were lines of excited posts. Monster Girl? I'm going to die. I'm going to make a slime mother After Juga scrolled down the slider a few times, he suddenly lost interest and was a little disgusted. It sounds nice. Monster Girl, if she really appears in front of me. After all, reality is reality, no matter how cute she is. When 2 dimensions become 3 dimensions, it will be horrifying. But if it was before today, perhaps he would be one of the happy people. Juga laughed self-deprecatingly. He sat there in a daze until the commercial street became completely deserted. Other than the convenience store that was open 24 hours a day, there were no other shops that were still open. Sure enough, there is no free lunch in the world. Juga shook his head, hesitated, and finally rushed home. He came back home in a hurry, so he didn't bring anything with him except his phone. Even if he wanted to stay outside, he didn't have an ID card to register. He could only bite the bullet and go back. He thought that although Nanako, at least, she wouldn't harm him. He silently went back to the rented apartment downstairs, and when he walked to his own floor, he found that the door of his apartment was only ajar. Juga was stunned for a moment before he carefully opened the door. The lights inside were not even turned on. Juga swallowed his saliva and turned on the lights in the room. This kind of unit was very small, so he could see everything clearly at once. But Nanako was not here. She was not in the shower, the small balcony, or the small kitchen. Nanako was no longer here. Juga sat on the floor in a daze with his head lowered. He didn't feel happy, nor did he feel disappointed. He just felt empty. He tried his best to recall the scene where he slapped Nanako's hand away, the scene where he left her sight. Juga looked here, there, and at the door. Suddenly, he wiped his face with his hand and continued to look here, there, and at the door. His stupefied expression suddenly twitched. His shoulders trembled slightly. For some reason, he felt as if Nanako was about to disappear from his life. Maybe it was better this way. He couldn't treat Nanako as he did at the beginning. Maybe it's better this way. Nanako, she must be sad because of my behavior. Thinking back, when he ran down the stairs, he heard the voice calling his name. It was obviously anxious, hesitant, and frightened. Beep, beep, beep. Juga opened his eyes with a headache and subconsciously turned off the alarm on his phone. His head was groggy and his whole body was sore and uncomfortable. It turned out that he slept on the floor and a night had passed without him noticing. Juga subconsciously looked at the door and found that it was still ajar. He was slightly disappointed. He didn't know what he expected. Perhaps, after waking up from the dream, he had to go back to reality again. After that day, Juga didn't see Nanako again. As usual, he hurriedly got up in the morning and missed the first bus. He could only rush to the office in a hurry and was the last one to catch the office. Zhu Go. We don't have the ink box for the copy. Go to the warehouse and get one. He repeated the same work every day and was so busy that he didn't even know what he was doing. Zhu Go, send this sample to the factory. It can be put into production next month. He was just the most ordinary errand boy in the office. He had no dreams, no future, and no friends. Let me tell you, I participated in the TV station's Diamond 120 Seconds program and was shortlisted. I'll be performing in 2 days. Remember to watch the TV and cheer me on. It's such a popular program, how can you not watch it? Come, I still have tickets for my friends and family. Listening to that, the man who deleted his game was proud of himself. He just felt something like, oh, so it's like that. There was nothing to be happy about, nor was there anything to be unhappy about. After all, it wasn't his problem. Anyway, this kind of thing wouldn't happen to him. Zhu Go, it's time for you to lose weight. If you continue to put on weight, there won't be enough seats for us. He had always been the target of ridicule. It was like this in the past and probably in the future. Anyway, he was used to it, right? There's no more seats here, but you insist on sitting here. Are you trying to take advantage of me? Disgusting. He could only stand and squeeze. He didn't know when, but he walked out of the subway in a daze and bought some simple food at a nearby convenience store. Anyway, he was alone for dinner. He could eat whatever he wanted. Zhuge, you're not young anymore. It's time to think about your future, right? When are you coming back? I'll arrange it for you. We know our own situation. I don't have any requests. I'll make do as long as you can take care of the family and live well. He still received a call from his hometown once a month and listened to the nagging that he had memorized long ago. The next month, it was still the same nagging. I'm the man who will become the king of Hang X. This is my path. I'll protect this smile. Back in the past, the lights were off and the screen was on. He felt that time would pass faster this way. He felt that this guy with the straw hat was very handsome. He felt that this life of endurance was really long and smelly. But he still unknowingly continued to wait. He logged into his account, from CF to LOL to OW, from midnight to dawn. F***CK. Are all my teammates retarded? He smashed his mouse fiercely and cursed at his stupid teammate. But, damn. Do you know how to play mid laner? Where are you? Did your house explode? He scolded very energetically. But damn. Cheat. Report. He would be angry because of this. But dragon. Devour my enemy. He could not help but shout excitedly when he was excited. But why did he not feel happy at all? But why did he feel that time was longer than before? Why was it that the sky was not bright yet? He couldn't remember how long it had been since he looked in the mirror. 2 days? 3 days? 4 days? Day by day, he longed more and more to be able to hear "Be careful" on the road when he went out. Day by day, he longed more and more to be able to hear "It's been hard today" when he came back. But day by day, he climbed the dim stairs and walked into an empty rental house. Even now, he was not willing to go back. Once he went back, there was no way to make himself happy. Although it was short. Zhuge found that he had completely lost the strength to climb the stairs. Completely. I am too bad. Finally, he sat on the stairs in the corridor, covered his face and sobbed alone. After an unknown amount of time, Zhuge felt someone patting his shoulder. He subconsciously raised his head and saw a figure in the haze. He blurted out, "Nanako! What the hell?" However, it was indeed a horseman's voice. "You are a man, what can't you do? Do you have to squat here and cry? What?" "Landlord. Zhuge was stunned and reached out to wipe his face. I should have paid the rent. The landlord said impatiently. I am not looking for you. These 2 days, the people downstairs have been complaining. They say that they often see people sneaking around in the middle of the night, and they say that they can hear the sound of a woman crying. I am a righteous man, how can there be any demons or ghosts? I have to find out tonight. What did you say? Are you deaf? The landlord pushed Zhuge away. Don't just stand there. The person who installed the surveillance camera is coming up. Go away. What did you say? I dare you to say that again. Middle of the night, what? Unexpectedly, the tenant who was timid was like an angry beast at this moment, grabbed his clothes and pushed him to the edge of the wall. The landlord was suddenly frightened. They said that there is a female ghost wandering around in the middle of the night, crying. Zhuge let go of the landlord, lowered his head, and muttered to himself. It is Nanako. Nanako, she was crying. That day or when I slapped her hand away and looked at her as if she was a monster, she would be sad, she has her own thoughts. Even so, she is still by my side silently. I want to find her. 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 Looking at Zhuge going down the stairs in a flurry, the landlord patted his shoulder and then shook his head like a bitter gourd. The black smoke flashed and the landlord changed into Taiyinzi's appearance. Taiyinzi, do you want to continue the bet? Can Zhuge find Nanako? Master. Taiyinzi's face suddenly became very ugly. Looking at the club boss who was leaning on the fence and running down the stairs to look for Zhuge in a flurry. When we made the bet, I added some rules to ensure fairness. What did I say? Luoqiu turned his head and looked at Taiyinzi. You can only observe and can't do anything secretly. Well, Luoqiu said, then you do something and I do it once. Let's call it a tie, how about that? As Master says. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 135. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by small? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. He couldn't find her. He couldn't find her anywhere. He couldn't find her on the streets near the rental house. He couldn't find her even if he ran to the park a few streets away. Zhuge was already drenched in sweat, but he still couldn't find her. Excuse me, have you seen a girl this tall? She's really beautiful and cute. She's very sweet when she smiles. Her name is Nanako. The passers-by asked one after another. Some shook their heads and said they didn't know, while others just waved their hands and walked away. Zhuge suddenly felt dizzy and had difficulty breathing. He held onto the trees by the roadside. His legs were so heavy that he couldn't move. For the first time in his life, he hated that he only had this much physical strength. He hated that he didn't train properly. He had a lot of time. Panting, he had a feeling that Nanako was beside him, silently looking at him from somewhere. She had her own thoughts. She wasn't just clay. Zhuge sat on the horse and lowered his head. That day when he looked at Nanako with disdain and fear, was it like a knife that pierced through her feelings and thoughts? Zhuge felt that he was no different from those who had always ridiculed and disdained him. People used colored eyes to separate him from them. He also used the same eyes to separate himself from Nanako. It was the same. It was the same. He was the same as those people. Although he didn't say anything or express anything, he had never forgiven those people. Naturally, Nanako wouldn't be able to forgive him, right? This life of mine is really too bad. Zhuge sat quietly. The people on the street looked at him and continued to walk. He looked particularly fragile with his face full of stubble, like a homeless person on the street. If he couldn't make Nanako forgive him, would it be a waste of effort no matter how hard he tried? With a trembling hand, he reached into his pocket, the black card that he had been hiding with him ever since Nanako appeared. The familiar pinewood door, the familiar bell, the familiar shop owner, and the familiar decorating style that was filled with a strange atmosphere. After all, this was the third time he had come. The boss sat there quietly, as if he had been waiting for his arrival for a long time. Juga quietly pulled out a chair. This time, he didn't need anyone to ask him to sit down. Love go little say, Netwaku sir, is there anything I can help you with? I want to find Nanako. Juga took a deep breath and looked seriously at Luochio. In his eyes, there was a firmness that was not present in the previous 2 times. Originally, this was not what I planned to do. Luochio just sat there like that. Please go ahead. Juga took a deep breath and said, at first I planned to. I wanted to use something in exchange for Nanako's forgiveness. Whatever, as long as she can forgive me, as long as she can forget the harm I did to her. Luochio said indifferently, we can do that. Juga shook his head and said, but I gave up this idea. I realized that I didn't have that qualification. I have hurt her. If I use such a despicable method to get her forgiveness, then what qualification do I have to continue to see her and face her? I don't have this qualification. At first, I was afraid. I ran away from her. I left her sight timidly. I have never hated myself so much. Juga smiled bitterly and said, in the end, I still can't do anything. In the end, I'm still that Juga who can't accomplish anything. But this time, he said loudly and heavily, this time, I hope to use my own efforts to get Nanako to forgive me. So, I just want to know where she is. Luochio thought for a while and asked slowly, guest, allow me to be curious. How do you plan to get Nanako's forgiveness? Juga was startled. I don't know. I just want to know how to find her. Luochio nodded. If you want to find her yourself, as long as she wants to avoid you, I'm afraid you will never find her. Do you believe that? Juga nodded helplessly. How about using 3 days of your life? Juga nodded his head without any hesitation. As you wish, honorable guest. Luochio stood up and walked to Juga's side. He put his hand on his shoulder. The scene in front of him began to spiral away from Juga's sight. When he regained his vision, he found that he was downstairs in his rented apartment. This place. Juga looked at this familiar place in astonishment. Nanako is here? Luochio held the black cane in his hand and pointed upwards. To be precise, she is in your room. How is that possible? Luochio said indifferently. When you left, she came back. After you came back, she left in advance. She calculated the time of your return and prepared in advance. Juga's shoulders trembled. She is, Luochio suddenly said. She should not be bored. After all, Miss Nanako has been working more recently than before. Looking at the puzzled Juga, Luochio said to himself, she tidies up the room every day. But she is afraid of being found out. So, after tidying up, she returns to her original appearance. She will watch the movies and videos you watch every day and then delete the records, and so on. Then, she must be more lonely than before, right? Juga could not imagine how she spent those days. So, she has been doing so much for me all this time. Juga looked at Luochio in a daze. I also want to do something for her. Can I buy something from you? Of course. You've always been our esteemed guest. Juga took a deep breath. There's a place I want to go. TV station. The live broadcast of the Diamond 120 Seconds program. As the most popular program in the city, in the nearby provinces, it had a terrifying viewership rating. On this kind of stage, even if you get off the stage in 8 to 10 seconds, you have the capital to brag. Mr. Chen Jiaming, get ready. It will be your turn to go on stage in 1 minute. Chen Jiaming took a deep breath. In 1 minute, he will be on this big stage and become famous. At that time, F*CK the food company sales king. I will become popular and earn a lot of money. Chen Jiaming jumped a few times to loosen up his tense nerve. He began to adjust his breathing. But at this moment, he seemed to have a blur in front of him. He rubbed his eyes and saw a huge figure walking out of the changing room. Chen Jiaming was stunned. Juga? Why are you here? This is the backstage but you are here to cheer me on, right? Ah, thanks. Unexpectedly, Zhuge suddenly rushed in front of Chen Jiaming. Without saying anything, he raised his fist and ruthlessly punched Chen Jiaming's stomach. This punch is for you deleting my game. You. Chen Jiaming fiercely jerked his knee again, and once again, hit the other party's abdomen. Although he was a fatty, the strength of his leg really couldn't be underestimated. Chen Jiaming immediately held his stomach and squatted down, vomiting out the bitter water. It was so painful that he almost fainted. This time, there is no reason, I just want to hit you. You, what about you? I also don't like you from the start. Zhuge took a deep breath. Suddenly, he jumped up and ruthlessly pressed Chen Jiaming down. Such a heavy blow made the nearby boss Luo feel pain. He shook his head and knocked Chen Jiaming with his cane, making him faint. Chen Jiaming, are you ready? Zhuge glanced at Luoqiu. Seeing that he didn't respond, he quickly responded, ready, ready. Without changing his clothes, he opened the door and walked under the gaze of the program assistant. He walked to the backstage preparation area. When the host on the stage finished his introduction, he walked up to the stage. The host was stunned. For a moment, he couldn't say anything. He actually retreated step by step to the edge of the stage. Isn't that Zhuge? It's Zhuge? Where is Chen Jiaming? F***ck. What's going on? Under the magnesium light, Zhuge walked step by step to the center of the stage. He took the microphone from the assistant and glanced at the audience in the studio. There were more than 500 people, including the jury and 7 or 8 cameras. He had never appeared in front of so many people, nor had he ever stood under the gaze of so many people, but he knew that there were countless people in front of the TV. He didn't dare to imagine how he came here. Fear and nervousness made his palms wet. He had to hold the microphone with both hands, afraid that it would fall at any time. Zhuge realized that even if he opened his mouth to speak, it would be extremely difficult. He subconsciously lowered his head, not daring to look into the eyes of the audience and the eyes of the jury. Nanako is looking at me. Thinking of her staying in the small house alone, quietly taking care of things and quietly restoring things to their original state, Zhuge's heart ached and he raised his head. My name is Zhuge. My full name is Zhuge Kong. My name is Zhuge. I'm not Zhuge. I've been a very timid person since I was a child. I'm not smart and I'm also very fat. I failed my exams, I couldn't even finish running 200 meters. Before I graduated from college, I didn't even have a girlfriend. But now I have someone who has always cared about me. After graduation, I just did the most useless chores in a food company. I thought I would be like this for the rest of my life. I want to work hard, but I'm afraid of failure. Although I seem to be fine, I'm always concerned about other people's views. I don't have any extra activities. When I get home, I can't do anything. I play games, I watch cartoons. In other people's eyes, I'm just a person who escapes from reality. I'm indeed a person who denies myself. I've always thought about why it's always others who despise me. But recently, I suddenly realized that it's not others who despise me. It's me who despises myself. I met a very beautiful and cute girl who understands me, supports me, looks down on me, watches those childish cartoons with me, and watches me play games by my side. But I actually despise her. I actually hurt her. I'm really the worst person. Zhuge said with a self-deprecating smile. Even just now, I directly knocked out my colleague and replaced him to walk up here. When the production team below the stage heard this, they immediately panicked. The director suddenly slammed the table. What are you panicking for? F***ck. Continue the live broadcast. This is the ratings. Continue. Thinking back, she's been silently doing a lot of things for me, but I don't seem to have done anything for her. So, please give me the time for a song. Juga silently lowered his head. Let me say what I want to say, what I want to express, my apologies, my thoughts, my everything. I only care about you. If I didn't meet you, where would I be? How would life be? Should I cherish life? Nanako, I'm sorry. Now, maybe I know someone living an ordinary life. Now, please look at me, I'm right here. Let time not rush by. I only care about you. I'm willing to be infected with your aura. I won't be afraid of anything anymore. So I beg you, don't let me leave you. Juga, she was crying. She was sitting in front of the TV when the program suddenly changed. At first, she was stunned, but when she saw that clumsy figure appear, she couldn't take her eyes off him. She used her hand to cover her mouth. She felt that it wasn't enough, so she covered her mouth with both hands. Juga, I really want to see you. Yen 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 yen. Chapter 136. Genius remembers love in 1 second divided by small? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Taeyinzi listened to the whole story while kneeling. Of course, he didn't really kneel on the ground. He just felt it intuitively. It wasn't because this guy's singing was so bad that he even ran away in the middle of the song. He even started to cry at the end of the song. Instead, it was the hopeless guy in his eyes. When he stood on the stage, facing the hundreds of people in the studio, facing the tens of thousands of people in front of the camera, and even more people, he began to unreservedly peel open his heart. This guy started to transform. He didn't become so dazzling that he, as a black soul envoy, would scramble for him. But at this moment there was obviously a kind of attraction. Obviously, this hopeless trash took a step to become a man with hope. At the end of the studio, his boss showed a smile. Taeyinzi knew that he was probably going to lose the bet. He didn't expect that he would overreach himself. If he had known this, he wouldn't have secretly let Juga see Nanako's true appearance. He didn't expect that this would become a trial for Juga to be reborn from the ashes. However, humans were a very magical animal. As long as they experienced a metamorphosis, their essence, chi, and spirit would be completely different. As a former Taoist, he naturally had a way to observe people. Master, I lost. Taeyinzi lowered his head. The old guy was a bachelor. At the beginning, he secretly tampered with the bet to win. He thought that even the boss of the club wouldn't be able to help him and wouldn't always pay attention to the Black Soul Envoy's actions outside. Obviously, that wasn't the case. Taeyinzi couldn't help but think that the Black Soul Envoys before him had more or less experienced his situation and had their own calculations. He followed Black Soul number 9 for a period of time. He felt that this big boss had extraordinary ability, but it was somewhat inconceivable that he could still remain loyal. But then he saw the horror of Yu Yi, and the boss of the club knew everything in secret. It seemed that in the long river of time, many Black Soul Envoys didn't have the heart to resist, but they were all worn down by this sense of powerlessness. In the end, they could only walk on the road of no return, liberation. Aren't you going to wait for Juga to hand over his soul before deciding the winner? Luochio asked curiously. Taeyinzi shook his head. There's no need for that. In any case, his little tricks would be exposed. Next time, it wouldn't be as simple as you do it once, I do it once, so we're even. Taeyinzi knew that the club's boss was trying to knock some sense into him. However, as an old ghost who had lived for 500 years, he was actually beaten by this young man, which made him feel a little awkward. Was it because he was regressing as he lived, or was it because he had been trapped for 500 years? The world had developed too quickly, and the way of thinking of modern people was no longer comparable to the ancient people of 500 years ago. Be more sincere. However, Luochio turned around and left quietly. Taeyinzi was stunned. Master, where are you going? The guest's request has been fulfilled. Of course, I'm going back. Luochio twisted the black cane in his hand, then put on his hat and turned around to push open the security door of the recording studio. I still have a guest to see. Taeyinzi was stunned. Should he continue to watch Zhuge here or follow him back? Give me an explanation. Suddenly, thunderous applause broke out in the recording studio. Nobody knew when it started, but some people stood up. Like a fast-forwarded scene, the audience began to stand up one by one. They applauded vigorously. The flashing lights kept on, and the cheers in the recording studio were deafening. Zhuge felt that his whole body was hollowed out. His legs went soft and he sat down on the stage. He did something that he had never imagined in his life, an incredible thing. It happened in just a few minutes, but he didn't know why. This feeling isn't bad. Zhuge subconsciously had such a thought, but soon Zhuge got up. He didn't have time to feel this and respond to the enthusiasm of the audience. He didn't feel that he belonged on this stage. There were more important places waiting for him. Thank you everyone. I'm going to find her. Bye-bye. Zhuge held the microphone and nervously bowed. Then, he ran out of the recording studio in a panic. Do your best. Be happy. Young man. Good job. Those were the voices of people who made way. It's him. It's that damn fatty. He knocked me out and stole my chance to go on stage. I've already called the police. Arrest all of you. I won't let him go. However, Zhuge, who was running out of the recording studio in a panic, ran into Chen Jiaming, who had woken up at some point. His colleague. Not only him, there was another colleague beside Chen Jiaming. Was it because he found that the one on stage was Zhuge and not Chen Jiaming, so he went backstage and found the unconscious Chen Jiaming and woke him up? Not only that, beside Chen Jiaming, there were 2 security guards from the TV station. Don't run. Who wouldn't run? Why would I do such a crazy thing? Zhuge turned around and ran. Not to mention how much he regretted it, he just felt that today was too crazy. It seems that no one is chasing after me? Zhuge subconsciously looked back and saw that Chen Jiaming and the others, who had been chasing after him, had fallen to the ground at some point. The 4 of them had probably tripped at the same time and were stacked together. When Zhuge saw this, how could he continue to stay here? He quickly ran away. Damn it. I've already lost the bet, at least I have more hope. Let's make my first performance better. My name is Nanako. Yes, at the beginning I was called Nanako. Since I was conscious, I was in a very small place, a dark place where I couldn't see anything. Until one day, all of a sudden, the world became bright. I was in a rectangular frame, and I saw different colors from the darkness. I saw something strange. Later I knew that it was a human face. Some strange things began to flow into my body. At the beginning, I knew that my name was Nanako, and the name of the one I saw, he was called Zhuge. From then on, every day, I could see him. Zhuge would give me a lot of clothes, and would give me food at certain times. I didn't know what the so-called food tasted like, but it would turn into light and flow into my body. Then I would feel a sense of satisfaction. He would also talk to me constantly, and he would constantly show various expressions in front of me. But that magical rectangular frame wouldn't open all the time. When it closed, I would continue to fall into the endless darkness. Every time that happened, I would have a very strong thought. I wanted that frame to open, and I wanted to see that person. Yin 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 yin. Chapter 137. Genius 1 second. Remember love / go / small? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. I began to understand what it means to go to work, what it means to get off work, what it means to be human. I don't know why, but those things felt familiar to me. It was as if I had experienced them before. Sometimes I would have doubts, where did I come from? Later, it wasn't only when Zhuge opened that small frame that I could see more things. I began to come into contact with other things that were similar to me. I began to understand what data was, and also began to understand what I was. The character in the game was a character created by the user. As long as I connected to the internet, I could feel that there were many characters like me. I tried to communicate with these characters, I wanted to talk to them. That way, when I couldn't see Juga, I wouldn't feel bored. Yes, I began to understand what boredom was. But, no matter how much I called, they ignored me. They seemed to be different from me. In the other world on the screen, it seemed like I was the only one that existed. I really wanted to leave this world. I didn't want to be shrouded in darkness. I really wanted to see Juga. I really wanted to chat with Juga, even though I knew that I could only use those written words to express it. But somehow, I felt that Juga knew. Even if it was just words from the program, Juga still treated me as his kind. If that was the case, even if there was a limit to the time I could see him every day, even if after every meeting, I had to face the darkness again, even if I knew that one day Juga would be like other users and uninstall me, even if that day came, as long as it was now, I was willing to wait in the darkness. I thought that my days would continue like this until the day I couldn't see Juga anymore. He uninstalled me. But I didn't think that day would suddenly come. Once again, I looked forward to the screen opening. But this time, the person I saw wasn't Juga. Who was he? Why wasn't it Juga? Where was Juga? I saw the strange man's smile outside the screen. I hated this kind of smile. He looked at me as if I was a clown. That kind of teasing smile. Don't touch it. That was Juga's gift to me. Don't touch it. Please don't touch it. Stop. This is the scene where I went with Juga. Stop. Delete? I suddenly felt a kind of fear, looking at the delete option that appeared in front of me. Delete? Stop. Stop. Please, please stop. Stop. Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. Please stop. Juga, where are you? I want to see you so badly. I want Nanako to come back to me. I'm willing to give my all, my soul. It was Juga's voice. Finally, I was able to see Juga. This time, it was different. This time, I didn't see Juga. This time, I was able to grab both of his hands. His hands were big and warm. Great, it was really great to be able to come to Juga's world. Although I still had to wait for some time every day to see Juga, and the waiting time was even longer than before. But as long as he was here, I was able to have real contact with him and say things that I couldn't say before. It was really great. This weekend, let's go out for a walk? I couldn't even describe my feelings at that time. It was really my first date with Juga. It was no longer a moving scene through the screen. It was no longer a virtual scene that only I could see. This idiot. Why didn't he know how to hold my hand? He was only so familiar with it when he was playing the game, but this was already enough. In the future, there would definitely be a lot of opportunities. That was what I thought. That was really what I thought. It was just that my secret was discovered. The sudden spray of water splashed on my body, and I could immediately feel some of the secrets that I hadn't been able to confess to Juga. I ran away from Juga. I ran away without caring about anything. Not long after I came to this world, I knew that I couldn't touch water. As long as I touched it, my body would show signs of melting. I needed to wait for my body to dry before I could return to my original appearance. I knew that Juga might have seen the scene where I was wiping my body. I knew that he didn't say anything and just brought me back and left in a hurry. I knew that, but I imagined that Juga wouldn't come back. That was what I thought. Finally, I waited for Juga to come back. I saw the change in his expression. I didn't know what to do. I tried my best to be like usual. I wanted to get close to him. Don't. He left. This time, he was right in front of me. He carried me and ran away with all his might, no matter how much I called out to him. I could only watch him silently from downstairs. I followed him and followed behind him. I saw that Juga didn't raise his head anymore. I saw that he didn't have a spirit when he walked. I saw that he didn't smile anymore. I walked back to his room quietly. I tidied up everything. I put everything back to its original appearance. I sat on the floor alone. I waited for him to come back like usual, but many times I hoped that Juga wouldn't open the door. In that case, it seemed like I would wait for him to come back. But I knew I was still different from him. I knew a lot of things, even if Juga didn't mind, even if I wasn't a real person. I couldn't give him something that a real woman could give him. Aren't you tired? Suddenly, one day, a strange man appeared in front of me. He was wearing black clothes and a clown mask. I was scared at first, but this strange guy didn't do anything to me. He was very polite and could even be called a gentleman. He suddenly appeared in this room and asked me such a question. I didn't know how to answer his question. Wasn't he tired? I asked myself this question too. Later, I said, if I can't even stay in this place quietly, I have no place to go. He suddenly said, I have a worker in my shop. He brought me a customer recently. But this worker is actually a newcomer. He doesn't know anything. He seems to have gotten the wrong person. I still didn't know what he was talking about, but I didn't feel that he was malicious. Maybe I wanted to find someone to talk to. What attracted him wasn't the customer, he thought. It was you who was brought by the new customer. Me? If you need, you can call me. Dear customer, no matter what your wish is, as long as... After leaving such an inexplicable sentence, this strange guy left a black card in front of me and then disappeared from my sight. It was Juga. He was there. He was there. For me, he stood on the stage that everyone was looking at. On the stage, he mercilessly peeled open his heart, layer by layer, and tore open his heart. I covered my mouth with both hands. I felt that I should cry, but I couldn't shed any tears. My body didn't have that kind of thing. I really wanted to tell him that I forgive you. I don't blame you. I want to see you. I really wanted to, but I couldn't even shed tears. I couldn't do it at all. I am not a human. I can't be like an ordinary human. Juga and I really wanted to see him. I really wanted to see him. Finally, the black card suddenly burned in front of me. I saw a wooden door and heard the sound of a bell. I heard the strange man who appeared before say, "Welcome." Well, Juga looked up at the small iron window on the wall. After that day, he didn't see Nanako again. Although he rushed back to his rented house from the TV station, he still didn't see Nanako. He saw that the TV wasn't turned off, but Nanako still wasn't here. He still didn't get Nanako's forgiveness? Juga smiled bitterly. He didn't know how he spent that night. The next day, some people came to Juga's rented house. Chern Jiaming came with some people. Juga didn't say anything and quietly followed him to the police station. This guy didn't hesitate to call the police and wanted to sue him. Juga didn't even care that this guy was gritting his teeth and cursing. He only felt that his punches and kicks were very satisfying. Why didn't he do it more? I won't give up like this. If one day can't make you forgive me, then 2 days, 3 days, in this lifetime. Taking a deep breath, Juga looked at the blue sky outside the small iron window of the detention room. There was no confusion, only a firm thought in his heart. I don't need to be depressed. Before I get Nanako's forgiveness, I don't have the qualification to be depressed. Juga-tsung, you can go out now. Someone is here to bail you out, but don't wander around and wait for the court summons. Who would bail him out? Juga was stunned, thinking that his parents who were still in his hometown would be alarmed. That would be a really troublesome matter. He walked out dejectedly, vexed about how he should explain to his parents. Perhaps he would be scolded right on the spot, right? After all, he did such a shameful thing. However, it wasn't his parents. Then who was waiting outside the door? Who was the person wearing a white big hat and a plain dress, standing there quietly? Who was it? Short hair. Wasn't it Nanako? Yin. Chapter 138. Genius 1 second. Remember love/go/little? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. Is it Nanako? Or is it not? Juga was not sure. He asked a question, but the other party did not respond. The face with the sunglasses vaguely looked like Nanako, but the figure was slightly taller. But the other party did not say anything, directly walked to the nearby taxi, opened the door and got in, then waved at him. It should be this girl who bailed him out, right? In the end, Juga still got into the taxi with doubts in his mind. Then he did not say anything along the way, the girl just looked out of the window. Juga wanted to say something, but in the end he could only lower his head in bewilderment. Do I know you? Although I thank you for bailing me out, but I want to get off, I want to find someone. Juga mustered up his courage. But suddenly the taxi stopped. The place where it stopped was a park. Juga was startled. The girl had already got off the taxi and walked into the park alone. Juga scratched his head. He just wanted to ask clearly. There was a feeling in his heart that made him subconsciously follow her. The girl carried him and walked into the park. As they walked, the people around them became fewer and fewer. Juga looked around and suddenly remembered that he once strolled in this park with Nanako. Suddenly, the girl turned around and took off her sunglasses. Nanako. In an instant, the girl who took off her sunglasses almost overlapped with the Nanako in his memory. But he quickly shook his head. Although they overlapped, there were still many differences between the two. It could only be said that the similarity between the two could reach about 60%? Juga subconsciously thought. At this time, the girl seemed to be a little annoyed, suddenly reached out and pinched her hair. My hair was cut off, seems like it's still lacking a little. But this was Nanako's voice. This is... The girl walked in front of Juga and suddenly reached out to grab Juga's chin and pinched it hard. I just woke up and immediately ran out of the hospital to see you. Why do you look unhappy instead? The girl's eyes widened. Or are you saying that the words you said on TV were all lies? Ah. Juga really didn't know what this girl was talking about. Wake up? The girl nodded and walked beside Juga. Well, that day, I suddenly fainted and went to a dark place. I even forgot who I was. Until one day, you suddenly appeared in front of me. This. Juga opened his mouth in disbelief. However, when he thought about how even Nanako could appear in front of him, it didn't seem impossible. That person said it should be said that his soul had left his body and accidentally entered the data of the game. Since then, he has been trapped, the girl said in a distressed manner. If I had known, I wouldn't have moved around during work. It seems like I got electrocuted. Electrocuted? His soul left his body and entered the game's application. Trapped for a long time? Every day, I let a pig-headed guy make a fuss. If he's not giving me food, he's forcing me to change clothes. Are you a pervert? The girl turned around and suddenly put on a fierce face. Juga's forehead was instantly filled with cold sweat. I am sorry, but now naturally, my soul has returned to my original body. Are you an idiot? Do you still need to ask? The girl said impatiently. I am sorry. He really couldn't understand what this girl was thinking. Finally, I meet you. Unexpectedly, the girl suddenly let go of his chin and hugged him. She buried her face in his chest. I am Nanako, silly. Nanako said that she will always be by Juga's side. Have you forgotten? It's Nanako, it's really her. Juga subconsciously closed his hands and hugged the girl tightly in his arms. Tears suddenly surged out. Nanako. It's really you. Yeah. You want to strangle me. Disgusting, don't let your snot flow out. Disgusting. I am sorry. It's about time for you to lose weight. Yes, Juga, this time, you still don't plan on holding my hand? The girl snorted. I even asked the driver to come here. Plucking up his courage, Juga took a deep breath and walked to the girl's side. He grabbed her hand. It was not cold, but warm, soft, and boneless. The two of them casually strolled in the park and completed the date they couldn't finish last time. Right. Nanako, what's your original name? Zhou Yuanshan. The girl said softly. But usually, it's not called this. Usually, it's Meng Xiaoyu. Suddenly, Zhuge stopped. Meng Xiaoyu, he remembered who she was. She was the prototype of Nanako that he made as a reference. She was one of the original voice actresses for the game's advertisement. Then, "Customer, may I ask if there's anything you want this time?" "What else do I want?" Zhuge sat there anxiously. He felt like he was sitting on pins and needles. He wondered if he was possessed. This was the 4th time he came to this place. "I want to know if Nanako came here to make a deal?" Zhuge finally gathered his courage. One day. Zhuge tearfully looked at the one day of life that was deducted from him. He got a definite answer. Then, what did Nanako use to make the deal? "I asked her before. She told me it was a secret, but she wouldn't tell me. It's more expensive to ask about other customers' deals. But considering the relationship between the two of you, 1 year." Zhuge tearfully looked at the 1 year of life that was deducted from his life. He felt that if he couldn't get the answer, he wouldn't be happy for the rest of his life. Miss Zhou Yuanshan's consciousness was accidentally separated from her body. Of course, if she was in this state for a long time, even if her body was maintained by the machine, she wouldn't wake up. Of course, only 1 year of life was used to let her consciousness return to her body. "Then, is there anything else you need?" "No, no." Zhuge quickly stood up and threw the black card on the table. He looked at the boss of the club and said, "I don't want this thing." He took a deep breath and said seriously, "I don't think I'll need it in the future." Luoqiu grabbed the card and turned it in his palm. "I'm afraid it's not possible. After all, this is one of the proof of your transaction. Apart from the few transactions you've made, when your life ends, we will." Boss Luo walked to Zhuge's side and put the card back into his pocket. He patted his shoulder and whispered in his ear, "Take away your soul." When Zhuge came back to his senses, he found himself standing outside the rental house. Zhuge suddenly smiled. "Soul? That kind of thing? Now there is something more important than that." He took a deep breath and opened the door of the rental house. "Welcome back. Zhuge, do you want to eat first or take a shower first? Or me? That kind of thing is no longer important. As long as I can live with her, that's enough." Yin 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 yin. Chapter 139. Genius 1 second. Remember love divided by go divided by little? Sagnet, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Typhoon Getten will hit our city in the next 2 days. The Meteorological Center asks everyone to be ready as soon as possible. Luoqiu looked out of the window. The sun was still shining brightly, and it didn't look like there would be a storm. Of course, the heat brought by the typhoon was also a common thing. A love go little say, Chu, but she didn't have any motivation to go out. On the one hand, it looked like a stove outside. On the other hand, the temperature in the club was 25 degrees all year round. This was probably what the saying, "no comparison, no harm," meant. Boss Luo, who was leisurely flipping through the old account book, looked at Qinqiu without any disguise. He flipped through the old account book and happened to see the transaction of Yusanyang 500 years ago. He looked into Qinqiu's eyes. Almost at the same time, Qinqiu's face turned pale, and then she spat out a mouthful of blood. Yes, that's right, this temporary worker spat out blood, and it wasn't the first time. Boss Luo, who was used to this, knocked on the table with his finger. From the tissue box not far away, several tissues were pulled out automatically and slowly flew to Qinqiu. Qinqiu didn't resist. She reached out to grab the tissues and wiped the blood on the edge of her lip. Then she slowly closed her eyes, silently adjusting the chaotic breath in her body. She said she could see something that frightened her from his body. After entering the club, she basically spat out 1 or 2 mouthfuls of blood every day. Boss Luo didn't intend to consider what kind of cultivation Qinqiu was doing. He just felt how she persisted in vomiting blood every day. He continued to read the old account book. Customer Yusanyang cut off her 8 tails as the transaction fee. She got rid of her fox body and turned into a human. It was a very simple record. The transaction items in the account book were basically in this style of narration, and there weren't too many stories to read. From a demon to a human. This was a fox monster with 8 tails? At this time, Luochu brazenly looked at Qin Chuyu curiously, only to see a faint golden brilliance flowing under her skin, which made her look better. So, how did she survive with so much blood loss? A woman's natural instinct. The doorbell rang. Luochu closed the old account book in his hand and slowly stood up. The customer held a black card in his hand. Luochu smiled subconsciously. It seemed that he could save some time to explain. Beijing University, a laboratory. The third daughter of the Zhong family waited for a while. She, who had always been very patient, sat outside the laboratory and quietly read the original version of Red and Black. This was recommended by the third Miss of the Zhong family when she was studying at the University of California, Berkeley, in the United States. She fell in love with it as soon as she read it. The third Miss had a faint and pleasant smile on her face. After an unknown period of time, the door to the laboratory opened. A young man in a white robe walked out with a box in his hand. Luoyue, I'm sorry. A few students asked me some questions and I couldn't leave. The third daughter of the Zhong family, Zhong Luoyue, smiled and said it was okay. She closed the book and stood up. We're old classmates. Don't I know your character? The young man smiled. By the way, the thing you asked me to check is here. But, to be honest, I still don't know what it is. Zhong Luoyue showed a surprised expression. Even you can't find it? Or the conditions here are not good enough? The young man shook his head. No. In fact, the domestic facilities are not worse than those of foreign countries. This thing can't be analyzed here, so I'm afraid it's the same in other places. Luoyu, where did you get this from? It's not metal, but it's denser than any known metal in the world. What's more amazing is that it looks like a real card and has the softness of a card. The young man frowned. I even used a laser to cut it, but there was no way to cut it. It couldn't even be melted. It's an unprecedented discovery. If we can figure out what this material is, I'm afraid it'll be an unprecedented breakthrough in materials science. Jean Xian, for the sake of being classmates, can you not expose this thing? It's best to get rid of the data of your experiments, Zhong Luoyue said seriously. As a talent after returning to the country, although Jean Xian's laboratory was in Beijing University, it was supported by the Zhong family behind this woman. Considering that this was actually his financial backer, Jean Xian could only smile bitterly. I probably don't have any room to say no. It's just that I really want to continue researching this thing. Zhong Luoyue took the box back from Jean Xian's hand, saying indifferently, You'll have another chance. All right. Jean Xian didn't insist. After a few words of greeting, he returned to the laboratory. Zhong Luoyue opened the box silently, taking out the black card that she asked Qing Yun to steal from Gu Yuzhai. Undoubtedly, this was the key to her grandfather's miraculous recovery. It was probably not as simple as an unknown material. This is from the Zhang family. Zhong Luoyue frowned. She was sure that she needed to know more about this old Zhang family that had left the capital early. Third Miss Zhong picked up the phone. Prepare the car, I'm going to Maple Club. And get me some Yunnan shredded tobacco from the villa, I want to give it to someone. It was a black card with a mark, but all the marks had been used up. This new guest reminded Luochu of his first guest, Jin Zifu. They had all heard about the club's secrets from their ancestors. He was in his early 40s and looked a little dispirited, but he was still well dressed, so he should be a rich man. So the legend is true. The middle-aged man kept looking at everything in the club's lobby. He hadn't sat down yet, but was actually frightened by the things here. Of course, before the guest came in, Qin Chuyu had already walked into the back hall. Obviously, she didn't intend to witness the club's transaction. I heard that you can use treasures to trade, do these count? That middle-aged man obviously came prepared. He took out a small black bag from the inner pocket of his suit, and then opened it in front of Lucio. He opened the bag and poured out the sparkling diamonds on the table. Lucio swept these diamonds aside. Guest, let's talk about what you need first. Whether these diamonds are valuable or not, we'll talk about it later. Chapter 140. Genius 1 second. Remember love divided by little? We provide you with wonderful novels to read. The new guest's name was Luong, a jewelry merchant. A love go little say Webco. What he said was that some strange things began to happen around him recently. He couldn't hear some strange sounds at night. Not only him, but also his wife, his son, and even his family's workers could hear them. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't find the source of those strange sounds. Not only that, the flowers and plants in the garden of the mansion all withered overnight. When he woke up suddenly at night, his body seemed to be pressed by something, making it difficult to move and even suffocating. Luang's family didn't even have some horrible nightmares constantly. There were various kinds of nightmares, but they couldn't be separated from the horrible scenes, horrifying screams and cries. In general, Luong felt that his family was possessed by evil spirits. I spent a lot of money to invite some masters from the Jianghu to perform a ritual. Luong shook his head and sighed. His tormented face became more and more tired, but it didn't work at all. Those so-called masters are all liars. Anyway, Boss Luo knew that there were indeed people who practiced Taoism walking in the mortal world, but they couldn't be met casually like in the novel. You see, after being the Boss Luo for such a long time, he didn't meet many of them. It could be known that monks or monsters were scarce resources. Just a week ago night. Luang's face suddenly seemed to return to that night. My wife suddenly woke up in the middle of the night. At first, I didn't care about it, but then I felt strange and followed her. I didn't expect she. Luang's hands trembled as he fell into that horrible memory. Although he was looking at Lucio in front of him, Lucio knew that he was looking at the scene that appeared that night. She went to the kitchen alone, with her back to me. I called her several times, but she didn't respond. Luong swallowed his saliva. I went up and patted her on the shoulder. She suddenly turned around and smiled at me. Smiled at me. That's not the kind of smile a human would have. Luong hugged his arms tightly at this moment, trembling all over. She just looked at me like that, smiling all the time. I was running away, but she was always behind me. I kept running back to my own room. I locked the door and she was holding the lock. For the whole night there was the sound of the lock being turned. Just like that, I sat at the door with my head against the door and covered my ears. Luong heaved a sigh. I didn't dare to fall asleep until dawn. At daybreak, I heard the sound of a plop, but I didn't dare to go out. Until my son came over and told me why his mother was sleeping in the hallway. Lucio asked curiously, "How is your wife now?" Luong sighed. She woke up later, but completely forgot what had happened. But this is not the first time. 2 days later, my daughter-in-law also screamed in terror at night. My son, just like my wife, also had the same thing happen. Are you still living at home? Luong quickly shook his head. No, we all moved out. Lucio asked, after moving out, will you still encounter the same situation? Luong said, not really, but this is not the way. That big house is my ancestral house, I can't just leave it like that. There is indeed a ghost in Luang's ancestral house, 20 minutes of lifespan deducted. Directly eliminating the ghost in Luang's ancestral house requires 10 days of lifespan. While listening to Luang's description, Lucio didn't stop. He was already familiar with the operation of the business. While listening, he bought the information from the altar. Of course, if it was too expensive, Lucio would naturally choose other ways to get it. In addition, he could basically figure out what Luong wanted, so he inquired about the conditions of directly eliminating the ghost in advance. Although 10 days was a bit of a scam, it was just like the words, directly eliminating the ghost. If Luong signed the contract here, the ghost hiding in his ancestral house would disappear directly at the moment he signed the contract. It could be regarded as a simultaneous completion, but the return rate would be lower. Sure enough, he had to do it by himself. I almost know the specific situation. Luochu reached out and pinched one of the diamonds, saying in a flat voice, "So, customer, what do you want to buy?" "Of course, I want to get rid of all the dirty things in my ancestral house," Luong said without thinking. "That's why I came here." "No problem," Luochu stood up and said, "but I have to go to your ancestral house to have a look first. In addition, please take back these diamonds, they have no trading value." Luong was stunned. These were already pure diamonds of very good quality. This bag was worth at least a few million yuan. How could he say that it had no value? Well, is it because it's not enough? Luong gritted his teeth. "I can pay more," Luochu said indifferently. "Customer, don't you already know the rules we know? If you insist on using treasures as the transaction fee, then please take out the real treasures, not the currency in another sense. Of course, you can also choose not to do this deal. We won't force you." Wait a minute. Luong gritted his teeth. I have some other things in my house. But if you really have the ability, take me to my ancestral house safely." Luochu nodded, grabbing two of the same size from the small pile of diamonds. "This is the travel fee. Customer, you won't mind, right?" There was no abnormality. It seemed that this behavior was acquiesced by the club itself. Or it could be said that the club turned a blind eye to it. Luochu didn't really want these 2 diamonds. He just wanted to do an experiment. Yi once said that some customers had given her some small gift, so she could be regarded as an invisible rich woman defined by the secular world. "No, I don't mind." Lu Eng's gaze was quite unnatural. "Then you go back first and wait outside your ancestral house for a moment. I'll come back in a minute," Luochu said. Luong had no choice. He quickly packed all the diamonds on the table and put them back into the inner pocket of his suit. Then he left in a hurry. Lu's mansion. Luong had been waiting outside his ancestral house for some time. But now the sky suddenly darkened with dark clouds. The weather forecast said that there would be a typhoon in these 2 days, but he didn't expect it to come so soon. However, the wind that blew made the stuffy weather cool down in an instant. "Sorry, I just went to do a small thing. Customer, please lead the way." At this moment, Luong suddenly heard a voice. He opened his mouth and looked at the boss of the club, who suddenly appeared beside him. He was instantly shocked. This is what it means to be truly capable. This is what it means to be an otherworldly expert. Those Jianghu swindlers couldn't compare with him at all. "Master! You're finally here, Master!" What the hell was a master?